Andrew Marr, Iain Dale, Dom Jolly, then Aggie and Simon. A perfect evening's entertainment to come. We'll let the entertainment commence. I want to spend the first hour talking about the statement made by Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, in the Commons today, where she unprecedentedly said that she has lost confidence in the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. It's not difficult to see why she's lost confidence in him. But the fact that, 4 or 5 hours on from that statement, he is still in his job, I think is a mystery to everybody. Because this was the man who completely mishandled the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from the Aston Villa match last season. At the time, we talked about it quite a lot on this programme, and I took a hell of a lot of flack for my stance on that. I said it was completely outrageous that this ban should have been made. It was made under the influence of Islamist extremists who had somehow persuaded West Midlands Police that they should accede to their extremist views rather than do their job and police the match. The Prime Minister, to his credit, said much the same thing, and he thought the match should have gone ahead with Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in the ground. The evidence that the police gave to the Home Affairs Select Committee has turned out to be wrong. Now, the Chief Constable has apologised for that, as well he might. But why is he still in a job? Well, the Home Secretary, under laws passed by the Conservatives, cannot dismiss a Chief Constable any longer. The Home Secretary says she's going to introduce new legislation to reverse that, and quite right too. But why hasn't he saw fit to resign, given that the leader of Birmingham City Council says he should go? The Police and Crime Commissioner, he's kind of sitting on the fence at the moment, but he clearly thinks there is a case for that. Surely Mr Guildford should do the honourable thing and resign. What do you think? 0345 6060 973. And why on earth is a police force so afraid to enforce the law because they might upset some extremist Islamist elements in the local community? It's a repeat of the grooming gangs, isn't it? Where local police in Rotherham and all sorts of other places just would not touch it because they thought they would be accused of being racist or Islamophobic. It's not that the police have a job to do, and do it they should. Aggie Chambray is here, LBC's Deputy Political Editor. Little promotion for you, Aggie. Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
The Home Secretary has been pretty robust on this, hasn't she? Is it a surprise that she's taken such a hard line?
I don't think it is a surprise that she's taken such a hard line, because from the moment that this became public, that was actually before that match had taken place, she, along with the Prime Minister and many other politicians too, were basically saying they were extremely worried about the decision to ban the away fans. Now, she spoke in the Commons earlier today, as you say, and made clear that in her view, Craig Guildford had to go.
The ultimate responsibility for the force's failure to discharge its duties on a matter of such national importance rests with the Chief Constable. And it is for that reason that I must declare today that the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police no longer has my confidence.
Now, Shabana Mahmood also called that report that you mentioned. This was a report from the Policing Inspectorate that was commissioned by her into what had happened. And Sarandi Cook wrote that report. She called it devastating. And this, she reflected in the comments on why Sarandi Cook found what he found out about why West Midlands Police took the actions it did.
In his report, Sir Andy says he believes the police acted in an attempt to avoid long-term damage to local community relations. If that is the case, what a grossly misguided effort it was. Peaceful, harmonious communities rely on a police service that, above all else, pursues the truth. In a world in which misinformation flows freely and dangerously, the police, in this case, added further misinformation into our public debate, when they could and should have provided the truth that could have allayed fears.
Now, elsewhere, she said that the report found the West Midlands Police Force, carried out little engagement with the Jewish community, none at all with the Jewish community in Birmingham. She also said the report accuses the force of confirmation bias, meaning it was seeking evidence that supported a desired outcome. That was actually, interestingly, something that Craig Guilford, the West Midlands Chief Constable, denied when he was up for the second time in front of MPs, the Home Affairs Select Committee. That in itself, the fact that he was there twice, unprecedented. And she also said the report shows police overstated the threat posed by the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans while understating the risk that was posed to the Israeli fans if they travelled to the area. Now, that was really interesting because in that second Select Committee session that I was just talking about, Iain, Craig Guilford was asked about that, and he gave that information. And they said, well, why are you only telling us about this for the first time, that there was a threat to those Maccabi Tel Aviv fans? And he basically said, well, nobody asked us about it before, which actually led one of the MPs to sort of say, this is outrageous, or words to that effect. Another of the grievances against Craig Guilford is about the details of a report to the Birmingham City Council Safety Advisory Group. And the report referenced a match between the Israeli club and West Ham, at which the Israeli fans were said to have behaved badly. But Maccabi Tel Aviv and West Ham never played each other.
Which I can verify.
Which you can verify, absolutely. And last week at that second committee, Craig Guilford was asked by MPs on the Home Affairs Committee whether why this had happened, basically, why this was in the report, and whether that was AI. This is what he said last week.
The summation, I think, in the House, it was a question that was asked in the House, was that, you've used AI, or West Midlands may have used AI on this particular occasion. We don't do that. We don't use the AI.
It was, in fact, the Microsoft Copilot AI tool which gave West Midlands Police this false information.
Never trust AI, Aggie. Let that be a lesson. Thank you very much indeed. That's Aggie Shornberry, who will be back at 9 o'clock with Simon Marks for Call the Correspondents. Dr. Timothy Brain joins me, former Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Brain. What do you make of the situation that the Chief Constable finds himself in today? Because I'm surprised he hasn't fallen on his sword already.
Well, he's certainly in a very difficult position. That's a very clear understatement of the circumstances in which he finds himself. And he has lots of questions to answer. I can't second guess where he's coming from on this. But he knows that there is, if he chooses not to resign himself, but to make somebody else make him resign, there is a due process that has to be followed. And it is the Police and Crime Commissioner, by Act of Parliament, who has that role. So when you said earlier the Police and Crime Commissioner is sat on the fence, the Police and Crime Commissioner can't do anything else until they've been through that due process. And we know that that's about to be in a fortnight's time. So I'm second guessing here. The Chief Constable thinks he's got a case to make that will bring enlightenment on some of the areas that are still unexplained in the interim report. And I think we've got to stress that this is not the final report from the Chief Inspector of Constabulary and Fire Service. That will follow before March, he says. And that's what I think we all have to wait on. But I have to say, there are a lot of serious criticisms in this report, and it does require some further explanation.
I'm going to ask you a very unfair question. I hope you don't mind, but you can tell me to mind my own business if you want. But if you were in his position and you had lost the confidence of the Home Secretary, the leader of Birmingham Council, and presumably many other senior members of the community in the West Midlands, wouldn't you feel that you should resign?
I think it would really depend on what I know about what I've done personally. If I've behaved in what I consider to have been the completely correct manner, or only made some minor errors, as mistakes that, frankly, anybody in senior posts can make around the fringes of their responsibilities, I'd think I'd try and tough it out. But only he knows the answer to those questions. The person who Parliament gives the job to for accountability until that legislation changes is the Police and Crime Commissioner. There are lots and lots of faults with the Police and Crime Commissioner system, but until Parliament changes it, that's who's got the job, and that's the person who has to make that final decision. So that's where it's got to be. Only Craig Guilford knows the answer to the question that you've posed. If I was in his position, I'd have to go through my own decision-making processes. What have I said? What have I done? And to put it simply, would it be kinder on my reputation to go sooner than to be dismissed if I thought there was an absolutely copper-bottom case that I couldn't escape from? That would be the question you'd have to ask. And only Craig Guilford knows the answers to those questions.
Now, on the face of it, certainly I thought so at the time, but I think the evidence we've got now reinforces that. On the face of it, West Midlands Police, and I don't think they're alone in this in the country, have fallen under the influence of some Islamist pressure groups here. And maybe they've acted in the way that they have because they didn't want to be accused of being Islamophobic or racist in any way. But they've bent over too far the other way, haven't they?
Well, I think that if that comes out in the next stage of the report, that will be very telling. I mean, what it says at the moment, and I've got the words in front of me, there's no evidence to support a view that anti-Semitism played any part in the West Midlands Police stating that its preferred tactical option to zero the ticket allocation to Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. So there's no evidence, the report says there's no evidence to support the view that anti-Semitism played a part. I can only quote what
that is true, but I think it's quite reasonable to accuse those who were trying to persuade the police to do this of those motives.
Well, you'd have to ask them that. I can only go on what the report says, and that's what the report says. I think there are other issues that the West Midlands have to address. For me, looking at it professionally, the two things that came out, that leapt out for me, and perhaps as a professional I would take this line, is they didn't thoroughly use their own intelligence systems. That is a telling criticism there. And then not to declare it a critical incident at the appropriate time. Now, that's sort of being wise in retrospect, but by not declaring it a critical incident at the appropriate time, then the command and control structure didn't kick in early enough to see what beyond the tactics, to go to the strategic political level. So that I think is a telling criticism. I think there is one other thing that might have been done, and again, it's easy to say all these things in retrospect, but you've got to sort of, with these sensitive political things, you've got to treble check your facts. And maybe there was an opportunity, certainly before the Home Affairs Committee, to have done an internal review, maybe bringing in an outside force to double check the processes that could have been undertaken. That might have been something. I don't know whether there was enough time for that, but I certainly think when you've got these very sensitive political matters that blow up into even bigger sensitive political matters, then you just do have to treble check your facts.
Thank you very much.
And there are other chiefs who've fallen foul of that.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Dr. Timothy Brain there, former Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. The number to call, 0345 6060 973. Do you think that the Chief Constable of the West Midlands Police Force should have done the honourable thing and resigned? And if he doesn't resign, should the Home Secretary fast-track this legislation to enable her to sack him? She's clearly lost confidence in him. She said that in the Commons today. And if the Home Secretary loses confidence in you, I don't see how you can stay in your job. 17 minutes past 7 on LBC.
This is LBC.
Hi, babe.
Leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
It's 19 minutes past 7 on LBC. Don't forget you can watch the whole programme now on Global Player, on the LBC app and the LBC YouTube channel, not just Cross Questions. So if you switch one of those three on now, you can see me in my lovely Duchamp tie. And who wouldn't want to, let's face it. Naji says, the answer is indisputably yes, Craig Guildford must go. In no other circumstances would a Chief Constable be expected to remain in post, having taken such a major decision with zero basis in observable reality, having used AI to make up evidence which never existed, and having inverted what intelligence there was to the detriment of those who were relying on that intelligence for their own protection. The unmitigated brass neck of the Chief Constable thinking he can safely remain in post, and indeed of local MP Ayub Khan, who cheerled this decision from before it was even taken, is an odious stain on our society and what it has become for Jewish people in particular. I agree with every single word of that. The evidence, such as there was about Maccabi Tel Aviv fans being sort of violent and all the rest of it, well, I mean, it's nothing compared to many other clubs, and therefore there has to have been a motive for wanting them to not be allowed to attend this match. And I think we all know what it is. We know it when we see it, don't we? Paul's in Twickenham. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Ian. Ian, as a preliminary remark, I would say that I've lost confidence in the Home Secretary. I lost it when she said her aim was to deport 500,000 immigrants a year during her tenure. Moving to the matter...
Well, she didn't say that. She's never said that.
She said it from the dispatch.
No, she didn't.
The atmosphere...
No, sorry, you just made that up. She never said she wants to deport 500,000 people a year from the dispatch box. You're lying.
I understood her to say that when I was watching the Parliament channel. However, Ian, I'll withdraw that remark and we'll look into it. Perhaps your producer could look at it. The thing is, Ian, in terms of this, the atmosphere in Parliament this afternoon, and I think at the Select Committee hearings, which I watched, was bordering on that of a kangaroo court. We've got to be very careful here. However strongly we feel that the Chief Constable has misdirected MPs or made mistakes, I don't think in these circumstances, which the Home Secretary herself said were of national significance, that he ought to be required to resign unless there's been a public inquiry. I'm not happy for MPs to judge him. I'm not happy for a select committee to judge him. And I'm not happy for a single man commissioned to look into the case to judge him. I haven't seen the report of the gentleman who was asked to look into all this, Ian, but one thing he did say that I heard was he said he's had AI hallucinations. Ian, that isn't temperate language, and I would like the matter looked into more.
Well, it has been looked into by Sir Andy Cook. He's the outgoing Chief Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue. He's just about to retire. I mean, if you can't respect his report, I don't know what else you want. I mean, let's have about a dozen reports, shall we? And even then, you wouldn't be satisfied.
I think in terms of, say, getting information as to what the Dutch police have to speak when speaking for themselves, Ian, it'd be interesting. But, Ian, I think I'd like to take a step back and say, look, the situation here is we had a team from Israel coming over during what could, in shorthand, be confirmed as a sort of wartime situation. And then anybody, whether you had evidence, information or not, just standing back and looking at it calmly, the risk to the Tel Aviv fans of some idiot shooting at them or causing some harm which could not reasonably be mitigated. The police cannot be everywhere and mitigate every risk.
The police have a job, and that is to keep law and order outside football grounds. Do they not? They do it every. I mean, it's not as if we're not used to sort of sectarian issues in this country. I mean, every time Celtic and Rangers play each other, there are threats that go around. There are people that have ill intent, and the police's job is to stop that happening, and they do a damn good job in Glasgow of that.
Well, I understand that point, Ian, but I think this was exceptional. This wasn't simply an old firm rival match or a derby where there was likely to be fisticuffs in the pub and chairs thrown about. This was a match that was due to be held during almost effectively a wartime situation.
No, it's not. Not in this country, it isn't.
And well, it was. There was so many people felt that what was happening in Gaza, they would like to express their severe displeasure. At any
Islamist extremists in Birmingham. That's who you're talking about.
Yes, and if they were going to put the innocent Tel Aviv fans at risk, I think the inspector, for whatever mistakes he's made, he judged it correctly. I wouldn't put a child in a lion's den with whatever mitigation one might be able to think.
So you're going against that. You know better, Paul, than the Home Secretary, who is in possession of all the facts. You know better than the Select Committee who's interrogated Mr. Guildford. You know better than the leader of Birmingham City Council. You, sir, are a genius.
Well, thank you, Ian. But what I'm saying, I don't know better than everybody else, but I can think for myself, use my own mind, and before we sack this man and sing in unison that he's a terrible fellow, it did have the atmosphere of a kangaroo court parliament this afternoon.
Parliament is essentially a kind of court. It's not a kangaroo court. MPs are there to hold public servants to account. And I think from what I've seen, I didn't see the Select Committee inquiry. From what I've read about it, they've done their job.
Well, the Select Committee, and in my view, were desperate to prove that this man was anti-Semitic. They've been unable to do that. I think the decision... No one's suggesting he himself is anti-Semitic. That's ridiculous. I think the decision was right in the interest of preventing bloodshed. This wasn't a normal rival teams football match. This was an exceptional... Well, it was actually, because what happened was that these Islamist extremist pressure groups in Birmingham effectively convinced the police force that Maccabi fans in their match in Amsterdam had run riot, and that was reinforced by false reporting from the Reuters news agency, and therefore that became the narrative. And it turned out it was all fiction. And West Midlands Police should have actually known that, or at least inquired with the Amsterdam police force, rather than relying on reports and rather than relying on AI accounts. Well, the thing is, Ian, the Amsterdam situation I regard not exactly as a red herring, but if we just ignore it for the moment, just pretend... Well, it may be convenient to your argument to ignore it, but it's a pretty crucial factor in this. Well, I think the crucial factor was, first of all, there was quite a few different sources of intelligence pointing to the possibility of trouble. Amsterdam police have now have reported exactly what happened, and it was nowhere near what was being reported at the time, which West Midlands Police fell for because they were told it by these people that wanted the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans to be banned for their own anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic reasons. Well, I think, Ian, in the interest of preventing bloodshed, the decision was the right one. We don't prevent Arsenal playing Chelsea in the avoidance of bloodshed, but this was different. This was a case where someone could have been shot. Well, how come that in all the other matches that Maccabi Tel Aviv have played in Europe, I think in the Champions League, there haven't been any problems at all? Well, possibly that has to do with the links between the British government and the Israeli government. I can't speculate on that, but it seems to me, from my perspective, there was a serious risk of innocent bystanders, policemen... Okay. Well, then let's cancel all sorts of sporting events where there happens to be a minor risk of somebody somewhere being injured, because, that way lies madness. You just give in to the mob then, Paul. No, what I'm saying is, normally when there's a rough derby game proposed, the police don't cancel it, obviously. No, exactly, and nor should they have done in this case. Thank you very much. Simon's in Edgware. Hello, Simon.
You can just smell the conspiracy theory. Oh, can't you just? Yeah. It's so obvious. I've never heard such deluded nonsense. The fact of the matter, in fact, interestingly, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester said they'd be more than welcome there. Look, the fact of the matter is... he lied. He false intelligence. He lied again. Then he tried to cover it up by claiming he'd spoken to the local Jewish community, which, again, that was a lie. Then we now have a situation winding forward where I apologise, I now relied on A1. This is a man who isn't fit to wear the uniform. And there's no question, Mr. Khan, who is the local MP, was elected on environmental issues? No. Education? No. Other local issues? No. He was elected on one issue, Gaza. How does that interest the local people there? Unfortunately, parts of our country have been handed over to this kind of Islamic extremism, which is driven by, and I'm a member of the Jewish community, just for the record, by what I call incessant, savage anti-Semitism, using Israel and Zionism as their cover. Simon Foster isn't fit to do the job.
He's the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Yeah, I would abolish that post anyway.
It is being abolished.
He has no use. The Home Secretary can use Section 40. Chris Phipps is right, Section 40 to compel him. But the fact that he's sitting there and saying, well, we'll have another couple of weeks to look at it, is quite appalling. And it really rings an utter shame on this country and West Midlands Police that he had an ounce of principle, he would resign now. So the sooner that legislation changes. But the evidence is so strong, you just can't argue with it. It's so obvious that he's got to go.
Thank you very much, Simon. Stephen Ashington says, if this was West Ham versus Millwall, which it might be next season, you never know, we wouldn't even be talking about this. Well, that's absolutely true. Can you imagine the Metropolitan Police telling the Millwall and West Ham fans that they were going to cancel the match because there might be some sort of incident during the match? I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? The key thing here, in a sense, the details of this don't matter anymore, because if the Home Secretary says that she has lost confidence in a Chief Constable, I cannot see how he can stay in his position. Well, I mean, whatever the rights and wrongs of it are, in a sense, and you might say, well, that's unfair, but you have to have the confidence of the Home Secretary. Birmingham is Britain's second biggest city, for goodness sake. You cannot have a Chief Constable who doesn't enjoy the confidence of the Home Secretary in Britain's second largest city. 7:31 on LBC News Headlines with Amelia Cox.
The head of West Midlands Police is facing growing pressure to go over a decision to ban Israeli football fans from a match at Aston Villa. Craig Guilford has denied it was politically motivated after a report found the risk of violence posed by Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters was overstated. It's understood the UK is withdrawing military personnel stationed at a US airbase in Qatar as tensions between Tehran and Washington escalate. Iran has said it will target American military sites if Donald Trump intervenes in anti-regime protests. And Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers say they had a frank and constructive discussion with the US Vice President and Secretary of State. But they say the two sides continue to have a different perspective on the Danish territory's long-term future. LBC weather, showers moving eastwards tonight, becoming patchier in the south, becoming clearer for western areas later, lows of -2 degrees.
This is LBC.
When you
Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
7:34 on LBC. We'll come back to your calls on the future, or lack of it, of the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police in just a moment. But as you know, we've spent a lot of time over the past week or two talking about Iran on this programme. We're not doing a phone-in on it tonight, but I do want to turn to it for a few minutes now, because there have been meetings in the White House over the past 24 hours trying to decide what America should do. Should it launch some sort of military action against the regime in Tehran? Would that actually help the cause of the uprising or not? I suspect if it is going to happen, it'll happen within the next 48 hours. Now, on the LBC app and LBC website, we've got a live blog bringing you up to date with everything you need to know about the tensions surrounding Iran and what the US might do. You can download the all-new LBC app or head to lbc.co.uk. Well, let's get some insight in this from Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, who joins us live from the US. He's a former US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East and also served later as Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs. Mark, thank you for joining us tonight. How do you read the situation? Do you agree with me that if there is going to be some action, it's likely to happen in the next 48 hours?
I don't really think we can put a timeline on it. President Trump certainly does seem to be one that will go earlier rather than later, but I hope that we'll take a look at what the conditions say in terms of the weather, in terms of the air defense status, in terms of whatever is necessary to execute whatever mission the president assigns to his units.
The reason I think it might be sooner rather than later, and you're far more of an expert than I am, but because of the number of shootings, murders that the IRGC has done over the past few days, I mean, it's rumoured to be now at least 12,000. If there isn't any form of action in the next 48 hours, I suspect the number of people coming out on the streets might well dwindle because, understandably, they don't want to be shot dead.
Well, I certainly understand that, but I think it's important to note, if you take a look at the Venezuela operation, it seemed to have been delayed time after time after time. And what it turns out is they were waiting for better intel. It depends on what the mission is. If it's to blow up stationary stuff, that's a fairly easy target. On the other hand, if you're going after key leadership like the head of the IRGC or the head of the Basij, those units that are in fact causing most of the deaths on the streets, the intel has to be precise and the intel has to be perfect.
Is there a risk, though, that this could be counterproductive, that if it isn't a very sort of precise strike, maybe against the IRGC headquarters or something that where a lot of the decisions are made as to how heavily to go in by the IRGC, if it's much more widespread than that, it could be counterproductive and give the regime forces almost an encouragement to be even more unified than they may be at the moment.
Well, look, all military operations have risk. And I think one of the major concerns we have is how solid and how resilient the IRGC is. I don't think that anybody is expecting that after military operations by the U.S., the IRGC is going to lay down their weapons and stop shooting civilians. It would, if I was running the operation, my objective would simply be to bring some form of justice to those that are managing it and continue that until it stops. I think a good parallel for that would be what the Israelis did with the Hezbollah leadership inside of Lebanon for months and months. They just continued to take out different levels of Hezbollah until it was functionally leaderless, and those Hezbollah leaders that had directed the campaign against the Israelis found their justice.
I was talking on my Where Politics Meets History podcast this afternoon, which is being released tomorrow morning, about the 1979 revolution, where in the year up to that, there had been demonstrations on the streets sort of against the then regime headed by the Shah. That took a year, excuse me, for the regime to change. Do you think that everybody's becoming a little bit impatient and that this uprising might have to last months in order to effect regime change?
Well, I think the answer is yes, and I agree with you that these things don't happen overnight. The problem with regime change is it often seems impossible until it becomes inevitable. You really don't know what the tipping point is. You really don't know what it is that causes the regime to just say it's over and we need to move on. But you can imagine that from the Beit Rahabi, which is the house of leadership inside of Tehran, where the Ayatollah operates out of. If he looks outside of his window, things aren't looking in his favor. The population is rioting. His security forces are having to use the heavy-handed approach. The economy is not going to get better because of these protests. The inflation will still maintain rampant growth. And they've also got a water challenge where the water's running out inside of Tehran. So at what point the behavior of the leadership changes in a regime, that's the point, the tipping point, which causes things to change. They can fight for years, but until Pahlavi gets on an airplane and leaves, until in 1979 or 1978, until the Ayatollah or his minions say we are going to change the regime, you're right, this could go on for quite some time.
Thank you very much for joining us. That's Brigadier General Mark Kimmett there. Now, do make sure you keep up to date with everything you need to know about the situation in Iran, what's going on in Washington. Of course, stay with us here on LBC, but also download the LBC app and head to our live blog for all the latest. And Simon Marks will be joining us after 9 with Aggie Chambray, and I'm sure these kinds of questions are going to come up in that too. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question at 8 o'clock in only 20 minutes. Sir Brandon Lewis, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow, Annabel Denham, columnist for the Daily Telegraph, and Dom Jolly, comedian and broadcaster, who's also a former diplomat for the European Union. They'll be here to answer your questions after 8. Right, back to your calls, and these, of course, surround the future, or possibly lack of it, of Craig Guilford, the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police. Anthony is in Hampstead. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, belated Happy New Year. What I wanted to say is Yaub Khan, who is the only legal person in this whole batch, he should be Gilmore should be investigated if there were any correspondence, WhatsApp or emails between the two of them. If that's the case, then you have a sitting MP that has lied to Parliament in the face of Parliament.
Why? What has he said? There haven't been any emails.
Part of it. If he knew that this AI was lies, then he, as an MP, knew what was going on.
Why would he have known that?
Well, he sung from the rooftop, but he was the one that stopped the fans coming to Maccabi Tel Aviv fans coming.
Well, he was certainly a leading voice in that regard. You're absolutely right, but I don't think it's reasonable to say that he would have known all the details of the police investigation.
Yeah, but at least at this moment in time, you've got to find out who put Gilmore up to it.
Well, the Chief Constable was clearly influenced by all sorts of different groups, of which Ayub Khan, he was the MP, so he had every right to have a view and express that view. But I think he was also representing other groups who obviously held a similar view.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, if he knew that this AI was being used to stop them coming, then as an MP, you can't have an MP that's no different than the head of a police force knowing what was going on.
OK, Anthony, thank you. Jack is in Dagenham. Hi, Jack.
Hello, Ian. I'm very happy with the decision of the West Midlands Police because I think we should have an independent police force able to come up with its own decisions, and that's it. I think health and safety was adhered to, and there was no trouble that night. And
well, clearly there wasn't, because the Maccabi fans weren't there.
Yes, and they should not have been either.
Why? Because, I mean, the report that was released today by Sir Andy Cook, surely, even if you stick to your belief that that decision was right, surely there are questions raised about the decision-making process.
No, not really, because majority of the people in this country saw what happened in Amsterdam.
No, but that's the point. They didn't, because some of the pictures were faked. The Amsterdam police have actually made clear that the reports that West Midlands police were relying on were not accurate.
What pictures were fake?
Well, some of the pictures that were circulating on Twitter were certainly fake, and the allegations made Where
has this been revealed?
Well, it's been revealed in this report today, but...
No, hold on. Where was it revealed before this report? This report, if these pictures were faked, yes, then the report must have got them from somewhere. So where did the report get them from?
I've got no idea.
Exactly.
But we know, do we not? We know that Amsterdam police have told West Midlands police that the evidence that they were relying on was not accurate, that these things did not happen. There was no Maccabi fans throwing Muslims into the canals, for example.
Ian, I was here watching the events as soon as it was being shown on the internet. There were reports that were coming out. There was even, I think...
there were reports coming out. They were reported by Reuters, and they turned out to be fake.
Think accurately on what was happening. And
well, how do you know they were accurate? Because Reuters were fooled, so you've obviously been fooled as well.
Well, yeah, that's the conspiracy.
Oh, here we go.
That's your conspiracy.
Here we go.
I think.
Mate, you're the only one with the conspiracy.
Well, no, I'm not, because I know that the majority of the people listening to this broadcast know that there are Labour Party friends of Israel, and...
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Well, it's all the Jews' fault, isn't it, Jack?
Is that a conspiracy?
Well, it's your conspiracy, yeah.
But they do exist, don't they? The Labour Party Friends of Israel.
Yeah, there's Conservative Party Friends of Israel. There's Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel too. I'm pretty sure there's a Green Party Friends of Israel too. What's wrong with that?
Exactly.
What's wrong with that?
And I have complete confidence that the Home Secretary did not come to this decision herself by saying that she had no confidence in...
Oh, right. So it's the Jews that made her do it, is it?
Hold on. Your audience will know that...
No, that's where you're heading, though, isn't it? Go on, admit it.
I did not say that. You said that.
No, go on. How did the Home Secretary come to her decision, then, if it wasn't her decision?
The Friends of Israel may have said to her...
Ah, so it is the Jews. That's what you're saying. You make me sick.
There's a willingness to censor people on...
Yeah, I'm about to censor you if you carry on like this.
Well, you see, this is where conversations sometimes run...
She is the Home Secretary, Jack. She is a Muslim. She is a Birmingham MP. Do you not think that she kind of knows what she's talking about in this?
No, I don't. I have no confidence.
And she's been bought by the Jews. That's what you're saying, is it?
When I listened to the first meeting in the House of Parliament over this issue, all the questioners, all the MPs revealed that there were Friends of Israel. Some were receiving money. And so I then lose confidence.
Who are these MPs on the Select Committee? You're accusing them of taking money, are you?
No. They revealed it themselves. They revealed their positions. Ian, come on, please. I'm telling you the truth. They revealed their position. One of them revealed that he had received a few thousand. But these are people.
And you think receiving a few £1,000s to finance an election campaign, that means that the MP is bored? The MP was obeying the laws of Parliament and being transparent about their interest, if they did indeed do that.
It must be independent investigation, not by anyone who is linked to Labour Party Friends of Israel.
Okay, well, what about Sir Andy Cook then, the Chief Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue? He issued this report today, which is why the Home Secretary came to the House of Commons to make her statement. Are you saying he's been bought as well?
Listen, Ian...
No, are you?
No, I'm not saying that. You're asking me the question, and I want to answer it this way. There are British military personnel. Let me finish, please, before you jump down my throat. There are British military personnel who come on this radio station because you've got speed dial to them. And
No, we invite them on because they are experts in their field.
Yes, and they are embedded right now with the IDF.
Oh, are they now?
Anyone?
Which of our experts is embedded with the IDF? Because if they are, I'm happily ring them up and ask them, because you don't know this. This is another spurious accusation that people like you will come out with to make out that we somehow are under the control of the IDF or Israel or whatever.
I did not say you were. I did not say you were. Why are you?
I said we.
What? Did I say you were?
Well, what is your accusation then?
My accusation is that there's a clear witch hunt, yes, in order to silence the police to come up with their own...
No, there isn't. Who is part of the witch hunt then? Am I part of this witch hunt?
Yes, I do believe LBC is. I do believe LBC. Oh, you're laughing.
Yeah, I am laughing because it's pathetic.
I'm glad you're laughing.
Well, it's a joke.
Because politics is a very dirty business, Ian. You know that.
Jack, I've been involved in politics for 30 years or so.
Exactly.
And it is not the dirty business that you think it is.
It is a dirty business.
How do you know better than I do? What's your involvement in politics?
I'm just like anyone else who listens to what goes on. And politics, for example, you ask me this question and I'll give you a straight answer. The Venezuela issue, it wasn't anything to do with drugs.
I'm not going to be sidetracked by Venezuela. You, Jack, I'm afraid, are a disgusting individual who thinks Jews are the root of all evil in this country, and I'm fed up with hearing from you. Don't bother calling again. Thank you very much indeed. Cross question at 8, ladies and gentlemen. It's 10 to 8.
This is LBC. Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:53. Lots of you supporting what I said to Jack. Somebody else, though, says, Ian, you're sounding shrill and defensive. Calm yourself down. This is England. Leave the police chief alone. Well, police chiefs are public servants and they have to be held to account. And I'm sorry, when I get somebody coming on the radio who is effectively being completely anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, and accusing all sorts of people of all sorts of things with no backup whatsoever. It's not being shrill or defensive. These people walk among us, and they're deeply evil in my view. And I'm not going to change my view. Sorry about that. Well, let's for a minute just go back to the question, what might be going to happen in Iran over the next few hours. Dr. Efrat Sofer joins me, chair of the Esri Center for Iran and Gulf States Research at Haifa University. Dr. Sofer, thank you for coming on the programme. What I want to ask you about is what might happen if there are some sort of military strikes by America to Tehran. What might the Iranian regime's response be?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Ian. True pleasure to be with you here. So the repercussions that might emanate from an attack from the US, I think an Iranian response will first of all be visible. It'll be something that would be a showcase for the regime to show its allies and its proxies that it's still relevant and that it still holds power, even though the regime is the weakest it's ever been. What I'm also very, very concerned at, so the Iranians might hit the US base in Qatar. They might close off the Straits of Hormuz and threaten the Fifth Fleet of Bahrain. And they might also fire missiles at Israel. Now, what has just come out from Israel is that there have been leaked reports saying that if Iran were to hit Israel, Israel would decapitate the regime, so to speak. What
does that mean?
I think there would be retaliation that would topple the regime. I think that, but that's pure speculation. I think what we need to be looking at here also, so the attack from the Iranians would be visible. And I'm also very worried that when the Iranian regime is pushed into a corner, we've seen what they can do to their own people. They've been massacring over 12,000 people in the space of a weekend. They've been taking doctors hostage. They've been murdering their own people. What they also have are cells around the world with subcontracted proxies who are ready. They've been mapping out dissidents, Jewish communities, Israelis all around the world. We saw in this country that the MI5 chief said that they've thwarted over 20 operations between 2020 and 2025 and further operations in 2025 alone. So I'm worried that as well as a visible attack, there'll be some sort of terrorist attack somewhere around the world.
Do you think there is a danger of any American military strike being counterproductive?
I think it's necessary to send a message to the Iranian regime. I think Trump is likely to not have a prolonged attack. He's not one for prolonged attacks. We saw from his operation in Venezuela, his assassination of Soleimani, his Fordo attack, that there were surgical strikes. So I think he's more likely to probably hit targets of the IRGC, the Basij, perhaps command and control centers, not ones that would target the civilians.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Efrat Sofer joining me, chair of the Esri Center for Iran and Gulf States Research at Haifa University. Don't forget to download the all-new LBC app and head over to our live blog to keep up to date with the very latest on Iran. Right, let's finish off the hour with a quick call from Michael in Bermondsey. It's got to be quick, Michael, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, we haven't got much time in. Thanks for taking me on. I came to this country in 1967 as a young boy. And in the last 15, 20 years, this country has taken a road that completely baffles me. We've allowed extremists to come into this country and their tentacles are deep. They're now embedded in our political systems. I stood down Horse Guards a year or so ago and watched 3 Asian police officers plotting what they were going to do with their friends before they actually implemented it by walking past Tommy Robinson, trying to incite some sort of reaction. I really don't know what's going on in this country. It is really, I mean, in the last 20 years or so, I'm thinking I'd like to leave, but I don't know where to go. because, like...
Well, there's 190 countries in the world. If you really think this country is one of the most awful in the world, then you're living on a different planet to the rest of us, Michael. Somebody says, quote, how the chief of police has been anti-Semitic. Quote him. Don't just make suppositions. I've never insinuated that the chief constable of the West Midlands Police was anti-Semitic. I have insinuated that some of the people who tried to influence him are. That is a very, very different thing. All right, coming up in the next hour, it is Wednesday's Cross Question. Joining me on the panel, former Conservative Cabinet Minister Sir Brandon Lewis, Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow, Annabel Denham, columnist for the Daily Telegraph, and comedian and broadcaster Dom Jolly. They're here to answer your calls on 0345 6060 973. We are, of course, streaming the whole programme live. You can watch us on Cross Question on the LBC app, Global Player, or the LBC YouTube channel. But we'd love your questions right now. The board has been cleared. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, there are increasing calls for the head of West Midlands Police, Craig Guildford, to go after the Home Secretary said she'd lost confidence in him. A police watchdog investigation into the force's ban of Israeli football fans for a match in Birmingham found the risk posed by supporters had been overstated. Dr Timothy Brain, former Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, told LBC the Chief Constable has questions to answer.
If I was in his position, I'd have to go through my own decision-making processes. What have I said? What have I done? Would it be kinder on my reputation to go sooner than to be dismissed if I thought there was an absolutely copper-bottom case that I couldn't escape from? That would be the question you'd have to ask.
The UK and US have withdrawn army-based personnel from Qatar. It's after Iran threatened revenge on neighbouring countries' military sites if America attacks in response to its crackdown on anti-government protests. Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers say they've had frank and constructive discussions with the US after Donald Trump's threats to take control of the island. They say the two sides, though, still have different perspectives on Greenland's future. And 17,000 properties in Kent and Sussex remain without water. South East Waters apologise, saying supply has been restored to around 8,000 homes. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 47 points at 10,184. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather: showers moving eastwards tonight, patchier in the south, lows of -2. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global. Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening to you. It's 2 minutes past 8 on LBC. Welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question. And don't forget, Cross Question is now 4 days a week, so there'll be another one along tomorrow. On the panel with me tonight, to my left, Annabel Denham, columnist for the Daily Telegraph. To her left, Dom Jolly, comedian and broadcaster. Occasional broadcaster on LBC nowadays.
Occasional, but yeah.
Sitting in for me occasionally, which I'm very sort of happy with, because I like good people sitting in.
I can't do your facial expressions, I was just watching.
That's to your advantage. To my right, Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow, and to her right, Sir Brandon Lewis, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. They are here to answer your questions. The number to call 0345 6060 973. And do switch on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel, and you can watch us as well.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to the first question. It's from James in Gravesend. James, what would you like to ask?
Well, good evening once again to you. I think I spoke to you yesterday.
Goodness me. You're almost a regular.
Panelists. Yeah, I'm a regular. Happy New Year to all the panelists, first of all, okay? Now, I read the report from the Inspector of Constabulary. I listened to Shabana Mahmood in the House give her a statement in the House. Do they think it's now time for the Chief Constable of West Midlands to do the honourable thing and fall on his sword?
Brandon, you were a Home Office Minister at one point. I mean, the Home Secretary has said she's lost confidence in the Chief Constable. Why is he still in position?
I don't know. So I couldn't hear the crowd. I've got no sound.
Oh, right.
So
Well, the question was, should the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police do the honourable thing?
Yes. I find it astonishing that with everything that's happened, let alone the clear view of the Home Secretary, who would have all of the details, that he is still in post, both from his own personal credibility and judgment, but also from his bosses to allow him to stay in post one way or another. Yeah, I find it quite astonishing, actually.
He can only be sacked by the Police and Crime Commissioner, although Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, he maintains that the Home Secretary still could sack him under some 1996 Act.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But even aside from that, if you're a Chief Constable and you've got a Home Secretary who's made their position clear, let alone what is clearly the view of the general public, when the Home Secretary's made their position clear like that, your position is untenable. And the Home Secretary hasn't done that easily and quickly. She's taken her time clearly to look through the detail, and with that report has given a very clear position. His position was untenable anyway, but when you've got the Home Secretary making that comment, regardless of what the regulations are, your position is untenable. And the Police and Crime Commissioner should have been able to see that. If the Chief Constable wasn't prepared to do the right thing, the PCC should have done.
Stella?
It's not going to make for a very exciting programme for you tonight, is it, Ian? But
the programme is Get Young.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Set me a target. Look, when you are the Chief Constable and you are having to write to the Home Affairs Select Committee to correct your own evidence, I think it's very difficult for people to see how you can retain office, because surely one of the things that we have to have confidence in our chief constables to do is to be accurate and detailed with their evidence, because it has an effect on people's outcomes, on criminality, on whether you can investigate. So yes, clearly when the Home Secretary, it's an independent report that she's commissioned, the Home Secretary saying, I can't have any confidence in you, looking at how you manage this situation, you yourself are having to say, actually, I didn't get it right when I came to the Home Affairs Committee. It's pretty damning. It's pretty difficult to see how the public in the West Midlands can retain confidence if that's how he approaches something as sensitive and delicate as this.
But you've got people saying, and we've had a couple of them on the programme tonight, one in particular was effectively saying that the Home Secretary has been bought by, I don't think he actually used these words, but I will, the Jewish lobby.
Yes, and I think we give that equally short shrift, don't we?
I think
because conspiracy theories, yes, you made a face. If people haven't seen that face, they should definitely watch a similar face that people make, when you accidentally open a bin. Look, an independent report is an independent report. The Home Affairs Select Committee, by his own words, the Chief Constable is saying, actually, I need to correct the record. That is pretty serious for somebody in such a position of leadership. I think the people of the West Midlands will be shocked that he's still staying in post. From what I understand, the PCC has said he wants to wait to a governance meeting. That drags out for another couple of weeks. Actually, I think the people of the West Midlands now want credible leadership. So, I agree, he should do the honourable thing.
And I'll go further here. I think, first of all, it brings into question the PCC for not taking action and forcing this situation. But if you look through the last decade or more, it is very rare for a Home Office Minister, let alone the Home Secretary, to go and interfere in local policing in that way. So for the Home Secretary to make a comment in and of itself is a very clear message about how serious this is.
Annabel Dunham.
Well, I'm afraid it's 3 for 3 in. Yes, unanimous agreement that his position is untenable. He's not only lost the confidence of the Home Secretary, but also the confidence of the public, and trust in police, which is at record lows at the moment, is absolutely tantamount. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that the PCC, West Midlands PCC, Simon Foster, who is a Corbynite, who is a former chair of the local Momentum branch and backed Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party, which is not a crime, but it presents potentially an interesting dilemma for Keir Starmer, a potential split within the Labour Party. Now, he is saying that Craig Guilford will be questioned at a board meeting on the 27th of Jan, so this may well be a stay of execution. Let's see what happens after that. But I think he should walk, and I suspect that he probably will walk, because ultimately people do tend to do so once they realise the situation is irretrievable. panel?
Tom Jolly.
Well, I hate to disagree with the panel, but I think he's doing a smashing job. He really is. I think his judgment has been superb, and he's been complete.
Just like yours.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, he's just an idiot. I mean, I just can't believe that he's still there, and he will go, and why he doesn't. I'm interested in this AI hallucination. There were so many errors in that report anyway, but the one here to justify the ban included a reference to a non-existent game between Tel Aviv and West Ham, which was an AI hallucination. What is an AI hallucination? Presumably they're doing some sort of potential battle scenarios on AI.
Where Elon Musk is going to take them next, isn't it?
I think they were mistaking it for West Ham versus Millwall.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I see. I understand the joke, but I don't follow football. But I get what you're saying there. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm very, very glad. Follow-up question from James in Bordeaux. We have listeners everywhere. If Boris Johnson didn't have to resign after being fined for breaking the law, why does the West Midlands Chief Constable have to resign for this? A classic piece of whataboutery there, but is it a fair one, Brandon?
Well, I think you find effectively Boris Johnson did lose his job.
Didn't resign though.
No, but he did. He resigned as Prime Minister. He ended up.
You lot pushed him out.
But he resigned as Prime Minister, left Parliament. After the investigation from the Parliamentary Committee and their findings. So I think the question sort of forgets the reality of what actually happened. He did. And I think the harsh reality is when you've done something that breaches that level of confidence, then there are repercussions from that. And the Chief Constable of the West Midlands should be standing up to that, accepting that, and so should the PCC.
Anybody else want to jump in on Boris Johnson?
I just think he should have resigned quicker, that's all, really. But no.
OK. Right, let's go to...
The law shouldn't have been there in the first place.
A WhatsApp question. Nick in Slough. Why is incompetence paid so well within water companies? Oh. Now, the Chief Executive and Chair of South East Water have been recalled by MPs on the Environment Committee regarding those bosses' evidence to that committee about December's water outage in Tunbridge Wells. And this comes during another more widespread outage across parts of Kent and East Sussex. South East Water's Chief Executive, Dave Hinton's basic salary is £400,000 a year. I mean, it goes back to what you were saying, Stella, about being recalled to a select committee. I mean, This guy actually told a barefaced lie to the Environment Select Committee, and I'm not libelling him by saying that because the Water Inspectorate proved that he did.
Yes. And call me old-fashioned, but the whole point about parliamentary scrutiny is that it needs to be truthful to be effective. So if somebody has deliberately misled a committee, that's very, very serious. Look, I mean, this is where we will disagree, Brandon. Finally, we'll get some sparks on this. The problems with our water industry are deeply rooted, I would argue, in its privatisation, because actually you don't turn off the taps. So they have an unmitigated ability to print money. Fergal Sharkey has been amazing about this in holding these companies to account, as have, and I would actually pay tribute to MPs across the House. So Helena Dollemore's been incredible about this company, as has Mike Martin in Tunbridge Wells. But fundamentally, our ability to get these companies to respond to the people who are paying their wages, i.e. the public, is pretty limited because under privatisation, they have got all the goods, all the assets, and none of the responsibility for what happens next. So they've been able to cream off money for their shareholders. They've been able to underplay the investment and infrastructure that needed to happen to prevent some of these problems. And those chickens are coming home to roost. Now, the challenge is, what do you do about it? And I am somebody who is more radical than Jeremy Corbyn, because Jeremy always wanted to nationalise these companies. I would like to mutualise them, because actually what I've seen with a lot of organisations, and I'd include Transport for London in this as well, is that lack of consumer voice and consumer power to determine what your priorities are has catastrophic consequences.
I'd just abolish Transport for London. It would be much simpler.
But I would basically, I would put people from the area, and actually that would stop you having to repay the shareholders, because I think the shareholders have had more than enough money, as have the executives.
I think in this case,
legislation to get some of this money back, but we shouldn't be in this position in the first place.
In the case of Thames Water, I think you've got a point where clearly that company was asset stripped by this Australian bank that took it over. This is a different situation where the management they have a board of non-executive directors, all of whom come from the water industry. So there's no real scrutiny of what the management are doing, or no proper scrutiny. And they're using excuse for this water shortage is that there's been cold weather. Well, isn't it funny how the neighbouring water companies seem to be able to supply their people with water quite
Ian, you're
happily?
making my point for me, though, aren't you? That actually, if it's all people from the water industry reinforcing that this is normal behaviour, rather than people who are actually using the services and bearing the consequences of the decisions you make, this is the kind of outcome that you get. There are fines on these companies, and absolutely, Steve Reed was doing it now, Emma Hardy, and sorry, halfway through the week, and I've forgotten someone's surname. I'm turning into my mother, but
Emma
Reynolds. That's it. It's the Emmas. They're doing amazing work on this, but fundamentally, our ability to hold these companies to account is limited by their setup. And I think we've come to a point as a country where we can see that damage. We need to not be giving more money to them, but I think mutualisation is the way forward.
Dom Jolly.
Well, I mean, Kent seems to get a bad deal water-wise anyway. I seem to remember they were always the first ones to get a sprinkler ban, and when a drought happens, we used to ring people up randomly in Kent and just play the sound of a running bath just to tease them. But joking aside,
that was you.
That was me. Oh, was that you? It was an angry man in Tunbridge Wells, actually. An angry, unwashed man in Tunbridge Wells. But joking aside, I'm an occasional wild swimmer. And genuinely, and this...
That you flap about?
No, I'm just really angry in the swimming pool in the Cheltenham Lido. I just think it's extraordinary, and I think there is a thing in this country at the moment of failing upwards and people being paid, the amount of money these people are being paid, and for doing absolutely nothing. And Fergal Sharkey's the man that needs to be, as you said, needs to be paid some serious money. It just drives me nuts. I don't know what the answer is. I don't even know what mutualisation is, but something...
It's basically putting people alongside the board, so actually the public would have real power over the decisions that they make, rather than having to like it or lump it.
So it's a halfway house.
Yeah, without having to necessarily compensate the shareholders.
There you go. I've learned something today, which is great. I'm all for that.
There you go.
Well, I hold no torch for Dave Hinton. However, we do want to ultimately attract the right and best people into what are extremely important jobs, and I would apply that to MPs. I think that they are underpaid, and so it's not necessarily the salary itself which I take issue with. They need to compete with, rather than being crazy public sector, the actual private sector. So I don't necessarily take issue with the salary he's on, provided there are repercussions for gross mismanagement of the industry that he is a part of, and that, I think, has been a missing piece in the puzzle. To Stella's point about privatisation, actually, in the aftermath, we did see much greater investment in the water system. We saw fewer sewage leaks, and many of the problems that we have are actually down to the regulator, Ofwat, rather than the behaviour of the water companies themselves. Ultimately, we are an island nation which gets plenty of rain, and it's bizarre and maddening that we have to ration water in this way. Something is fundamentally broken. And actually, where Hinton is right is when he says that people are going to have to accept higher water bills in the future in order that our Victorian system... Well, it might be an unpopular view, deeply unpopular view, and as I said, I don't hold a torch for the man, but we need to accept that we have to have massive investment in what is ultimately a Victorian water system, and without that, we're going to continue to have these water leaks, sewage leaks, and hosepipe bans, and people having their water switched off.
If these companies hadn't been stripped of a lot of their assets, like Thames Water clearly has been, then that money would have been available to do this.
Well, again, I don't think the behaviour of Thames Water has been exemplary, far from it. And actually, shareholders take risks when they invest in any businesses, and there shouldn't necessarily be an obligation to put them before the needs of customers. Nevertheless, I don't think that this is necessarily a reason for us to move towards mutualisation or nationalisation of the water industry.
Brandon.
Well, going back to the sort of core question, again, rather similar to the first question we had about the Chief Constable, what I find astonishing with this is if somebody has gone to a select committee, has lied to a select committee, that's been transparently exposed, it is astonishing to me that the board of directors, the shareholders, tolerate the effect on their reputation, the company's reputation, of something like that in the helm. Generally in the commercial sector, if you have a chief exec who gets things that badly wrong, and then he's transparently shown to have lied to an organisation like the parliamentary select committee, you would expect the board to do something about that. So in that sense, I do find it surprising that he is still in post in the way that he is, and there's no question marks around that, just for lying, if that's what he's doing, for lying to Parliament alone. That reputational damage to the company. And there is an issue. I think that the priest was right around when you invest in a company and shareholders in a company, share values go up, they go down. The reputational damage of that should be encouraging the board and the management team to do the right things, to put the investments in the right place, to make sure the company has value for its shareholders. And if there are issues around this, then I think what we should be looking at, this comes back to this point about Ofwat and others, is make sure that not only regulations around the companies are correct, but that they are properly enforced and properly used by the regulator in the first place. But as I say, coming back to the core thing, to have damaged the reputation of the organisation in the way that he clearly has, and to lie to Parliament, again, I would question the fact that he's still there.
That's a fundamental challenge, isn't it? Because you don't have competition for your water. You have one set of taps. You have one company. So there is no pressure. This is not some crazy argument, Annabelle. You know, if you say, oh, well, after privatisation, loads of money went in, why did it stop? And it stopped because there is no incentive and no commercial pressure to improve investment. There is only...
But if you were to nationalise, you'd have exactly the same problem.
There's a load of consumers paying money and being given bills that they can't avoid because water is low.
But if you were to nationalise the water industry, inevitably it would be low priority for the government, and it would always come after, let's say, investment in the NHS or increasing people's welfare payments, and you would never get the spending on our water system that's required.
Okay, right.
Haven't had it under privatisation, mutualisation.
Some news just coming in from Washington, where Donald Trump has just said, wait for this, that we have been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and that there's no plans for executions. He has, of course, previously threatened to launch strikes on Iran if the killing of protesters does continue. Meanwhile, Sky News is reporting this evening that Irfan Soltani, the protester who's become the face of these demonstrations, was not executed today, despite previous reports that that was set to happen. Now, for all the latest on Iran, download the LBC app and head to our live blog there. We'll obviously be covering this in Call the Correspondents with Simon Marks and Aggie Chambray after 9 and taking your calls. We'll come to some more questions on some very different subjects in just a moment with our panel. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
21 minutes past 8 on LBC. Sir Brandon Lewis, Stella Creasy, Annabelle Denham and Dom Jolly answering your questions. And the next one comes from Shuvik in Eltham. Hello, Shuvik.
Hello. Yes, I am very much against any kind of American or Israeli military action against Iran. That will do nothing except worsen what is already a very difficult situation. But should the IRGC be banned and the Iranian and the protesters against the regime be helped in some other way, for example, sanctions?
Dom Jolly.
I actually know something about this. I've been to Iran. I spent quite a lot of time in Iran for a couple of books that I wrote. And I'm in a really strange situation at the moment where I sort of almost agree with Donald Trump, which is something I very rarely do. What he did, or certainly what he and the Israelis did to Hezbollah in Lebanon, where I grew up, has actually made Lebanon into a much more stable place than it has been for a very long time. There has been an opportunity to get a proper political system in there, which is at the moment working quite interestingly. They've also weakened Syria almost totally. And then with his sort of precision strikes in Iran, that did do some good. And I think that did leave the Iranian regime slightly vulnerable to what's going on now. Now, whether he... what he'd do in an attack, that I don't know. I presume he'd attack command and control places. Whether he'd actually go against Khomeini, is that possible? I don't know. I don't think you can ban the Revolutionary Guard, because I think they're an official. They're part of the government. And
I think the law would have to be changed to enable that to happen.
But it's a nonsense. You should definitely do something with it. But I think that's why people don't do it. So for me, I don't have worries of intervention in the same ways of things like Iraq. Iraq was always a slightly artificial country. It was made up by us, Sykes-Picot, after the First World War. It had differing people. I mean, Iran is a homogenous country. It knows what it is. It's basically religiously sort of solid. I don't think it will disintegrate in a kind of... But I don't think that if there was further action, I can't see Americans going in on the ground. But I'm kind of for anything that will help topple that awful regime. And I cannot understand why people are not out demonstrating for them, because you don't see much of that.
What, in this country?
Yeah, in this country.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Why do you think? I don't know. It's not fashionable.
I've got a very clear view as to what I think, but I'm the one asking the questions, not answering them.
Well, I think it's not fashionable, is it? I think it's one of the reasons.
Owen Jones got very upset with me yesterday because I said, well, where's Greta Thunberg in all of this? Where's Owen Jones? Why aren't they? And he said, well, I've got all of these tweets I've done. I said, yeah, they're only about Donald Trump, though.
Yeah. It is a fair point. I mean, it definitely is. I do not see why there's not as much, interest and push to save people in Iran.
No Jews.
There you go.
Annabelle.
I think also just in that last point that we often view foreign affairs through the prism of the West or the West's allies, and this is a conflagration within Iran, and perhaps that's a reason why it's not getting the due attention. And it didn't for a long time, actually, over the Christmas period, I don't think, across the media either. Yes, I think we should prescribe the IRGC as America and Canada have done. It would send a very clear message. The idea that it would affect diplomatic channels with Iran, I think, is absurd. This is a country which sponsors terror groups in the Middle East, which has sought to murder critics here in Britain. This country is our enemy. It is a hostile state, and we ought to be willing to prescribe the IRGC for that reason. But perhaps not only that, we ought to do things like using our cyber capabilities in order to break the information shield, which is currently in place in Iran, and we should look at how we might disrupt or cripple their internal communications. And ultimately, getting too much waffle, I think, from the UK government when we need more firm action.
Brandon, you were Security Minister in the previous Conservative government. I mean, did this situation about the IRGC come up when you were in office?
No, but from time to time, situations around prescribing organisations did come up, like the Muslim Brotherhood. And there are challenges in terms of the way the technical processes work. And I do think, actually, as a government, we do need to, and I mean we as a government in the UK sense, rather than party political, need to look at getting that changed in order to be able to deal with situations like the IRGC and for the government to be able to take a position on it and potentially prescribe. I also do think we've got to be very clear about the fact this is a state that has been a hostile state and disruptive to the whole of Western democracy for a considerable period of time. And we should be therefore supporting and doing whatever we can to support the people of Iran bringing down this dreadful regime. And I was going to say one of the most powerful things we can do, which potentially would help with the point you and Dom were just discussing around the reaction from the public and the understanding, is if we want to know more about what's going on there, then using technical abilities that some of us might have in the West, the US, UK, etc., to be able to break down that firewall so that more Iranian people can show what is really happening on the ground, will help educate all of us in the West around what is really happening there. And the amazing thing that the Iranian people are doing is standing up to a regime, knowing what that regime is capable of doing to its own people. And the heroism of those people in Iran cannot be underestimated. And if we can find a way to break that firewall, we will all see much more of that. And that may well help the West and people across the UK understand why bringing down this regime is so important and the right thing to see happen ultimately.
Stella?
Yeah, I mean, I actually got up in Parliament yesterday and asked about this, not least because I also think it's important to work with our allies in Europe who are looking at this as well. I mean, they've banned Iranian officials from the European Parliament. You're right, there is a technical issue about the difference between prescribing states and organisations. My understanding is that, I mean, so Jonathan Hall did some work on that and what that legislation would look like. Yvette Cooper was fielding the questions yesterday. She rightly said this is a matter for the Home Secretary, but she also confirmed this is on the agenda for the conversation she's having with our European allies. I think it would be quite powerful to work in concert on those things because it's not just about prescription, it's also about the sanctions that you can apply and the collective pressure. You are right. We know a fraction about. You can escalate them, and we can also break the communications blackout because we know a fraction of what is going on. I have Iranian family constituents who are terrified and horrified at the little fragments that they're hearing from their relatives about what is going on. And if just that is happening, there is a strong human rights case for the world to say this is not acceptable. I think the challenge that we're facing, and I don't know whether we're going to come onto it, is clearly our traditional notions of what the world order is have been pretty much broken in the last couple of months. So how people move forward is really difficult. But that's why I'm very keen on the idea that actually if we work collectively, we start reinforcing the idea this is about collective norms of democracy and human rights.
But if the killings do continue, though Donald Trump seems to think that they're not, but if they do, would you support some sort of military strike on Iran?
You can ask as many hypotheticals as you want. What I want to see right now, and I agree the question is the prescription of the IRGC. I think we need the emergency legislation.
Isn't it? But
no,
it wouldn't actually help
because I'd like it to go further.
Uprising.
I'd like it to be collective. I'd like us to work with Europe as well as with America on this. And I think we need to go through those stages first and say, absolutely, this is now, you are now not just a hostile state, you are a pariah state, and transition needs to happen because I think Dom is right to ask.
They've always been a pariah state. I mean, they've done nothing but cause trouble in the Middle East for the last...
Well, they've also caused trouble here. Emily Thornberry has the most extraordinary statistic about when the strikes took out some of the communication in Iran and the numbers of pro-independence in Scotland trolls dropped dramatically on our social media because of the disinformation and so we've seen hostile acts by Iranian agents in our democracy as well. But are we at the point where, look, some of this is about how we work with President Trump as well, isn't it? And we should come on to Greenland. We should come on to what does this mean for those alliances that we need in this new world order. But some of those alliances have to be surely about human rights. They have to be surely about how we restore a sense of what international rules-based order looks like. And that's got to be in every context.
Not sure that's his bag, really.
Well, that may well be the challenge. And I think the public are grown up enough to recognise this is not as simple as they'd like it to be, but it does need action.
If anyone would like to ask about Greenland or anything else, please do give us a call. We've got a very original question coming up next. It's 8:30 on LBC. Let's first, though, get the news headlines from Darryl Jackson.
There are growing calls for the head of West Midlands Police to be sacked over a decision to ban Israeli football fans from a match in Birmingham. Craig Guildford insists the decision to stop Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending a game at Aston Villa wasn't politically motivated, but reports found the risk posed by supporters had been overstated by the police. The US president says he's been told that killings in Iran's crackdown on nationwide protests are stopping. Donald Trump says he believes there's currently no plan for large-scale executions, even as tensions between Iran and Washington remain high. And Denmark says fundamental disagreements remain with the US on Greenland after meeting officials in Washington. Donald Trump's threatened to take over the Danish-controlled territory. LBC weather. Showers moving eastwards tonight, becoming clearer for western areas later, lows of -2.
This is LBC. At Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:33 on LBC. Some more breaking news about Iran. The British embassy in Tehran has temporarily closed and will operate remotely. We'll get some more information on that after 9. Our panel consists of Sir Brandon Lewis, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow, Annabel Denham, columnist for the Daily Telegraph, and Dom Jolly, comedian and broadcaster. Brandon, Nadeem Zahawi, a close friend of yours, former Cabinet Minister. I think you temporarily ran his very short-lived leadership campaign. How shocked were you, or did he consult you before he quit the party?
It was a glorious 4 or 5 day leadership campaign, if I remember correctly, in summer of 2022. Although those glorious days. He's made a decision that he thinks is the right thing about. I mean, he's outlined why he's gone across and what he thinks for the future. We don't agree on everything. He's a very good friend. He's a very good man. I think it's a shame that he's gone. I hope that in due course that he will take a view that the Conservative Party actually is the right place and come back. But that's his decision. He's decided to go across because he thinks that's where things are moving.
You're not tempted to follow him?
I very much enjoy not being in frontline politics at the moment, and I'm
not no though.
Especially no, I'm not, and especially sitting here at 8 o'clock at night, 8:30 doing media, which I think I did one bit of media last year, which was your show, Ian, and I'm going to try and keep it pretty similar this year. So
people are going to ask what I've got on you. So but I mean, do you seriously think that people who leave the Conservative Party are likely to come back before the election? Because I mean, it takes something to defect to a political party. It takes a lot more to re-rat, as they used to say about Churchill.
Yeah, it's. I mean, obviously, when I was chairman of the party, I remember talking to people who were thinking about moving parties and coming to join the Conservatives. And in fact, I remember somebody who did. It is a very, very big deal, particularly if you are, I mean, even more so if you're in Parliament. But it is a big deal. It takes a lot of thought. Nadeem would have spent a lot of time thinking about this. From my point of view, I think, look, the election is some time away yet, probably 3.5 years or more away. A lot can happen in that period of time. And you know, we will see where things go. And you know, as I say, he's taken a view about what he thinks is right for the country, what he thinks is right for him. We have a different view on that.
And right for his peerage.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Right for his peerage.
Well, Nigel hasn't got any peerages at the
well, he's going to have some.
Give out.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? For me, I think, you know, the best thing for the country is, I've always had the view, and I've always voted in that way, is for a Conservative government, and that's what I'd like to see in this country.
On that bombshell, let's go to Michael, who's in Sunderland. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Ian, and the rest of the panel. Seeing how this government love a U-turn, will they give the general public the opportunity of doing a U-turn and call a general election, an early one, obviously? I'm not waiting. I don't think what state the country will be in by the time we do have an election.
Well, it's not unheard of for governments to call early elections, but I think, do we all agree that it would be pretty unprecedented for that to happen? Annabelle, let's start with you.
Well, yes, it would be unprecedented, and I can't imagine what would incentivise the Labour government to do so at a time when Keir Starmer's net approval rating, I think, is about -60, and Labour are polling at about 19%. So were there to be a general election tomorrow, it would be very bruising for a party which only 18 months ago was able to secure over 400 seats. Look, I don't think that anybody really foresaw the cratering in support for Labour, and certainly not it happening so quickly, which was, of course, very advantageous to Nigel Farage, because it was Reform who were poised to fill the vacuum in a way that the Conservative Party weren't. I think that helps explain why they polled at around 28% throughout 2025. Now, whether they're able to sustain that in 2026 at the same time as doing all of the hard yards and professionalising so they could become a credible government in waiting remains to be seen. It's certainly the case that the British electorate has got a pretty severe case of buyer's remorse. They were promised change, they were promised an end to the chaos, and the Labour government has delivered neither. Most of our economic data metrics have worsened since they came into power, and that's before you get to the U-turns. I think it's about 11 by my count
13.
Today. 13.
Possibly 14 tomorrow.
Exactly. So, I mean, it could well be 2 in the space of a week.
Stella, let's assume that you're not going to agree that there should be an early election. But do you think this reputation that the government is rapidly acquiring for just U-turning on everything is now damaging the standing with the electorate?
Oh, if only it was that simple. I mean, you want me to do the knockabout defence? Oh, Annabelle's wrong. Actually, let me offer a reflection that I genuinely feel is that the stakes of politics now have never been higher. The things that we've just been talking about, the uncertainty in the world, all the things that we've perhaps traditionally thought of as the bread and butter of political life, completely upended at a time when there are long-term challenges in the country that mean that change has not been as easy to deliver as people wanted. Still the cost of living crisis is the top thing that people talk to me about. Can they take their kids out for a takeaway on a Friday night? Very basic thing to want to be able to do.
No, do I want the government home-cooked food?
You try doing that after a week. My point is that actually right now our politics is pandering to the idea that there are simple answers. Some of this stuff is really hard, where the government, I think, has got sidetracked, and I'm not a member of the government, so I am one of those people. Some of those U-turns are things that I would very much welcome. The kind of clearing the decks of ideas that people got sidetracked into is in that turmoil, in an environment where nobody has any confidence or trust in politicians at all. What can you do to actually make change possible and make change happen?
Do you think...
Nobody wants more than me, this government, to be able to be proud about what it is doing and showing that it has a plan. I completely understand and recognise that for people like Michael, they're like, not again.
Do you think Wes Streeting put his finger on it in his talk to the Institute for Government yesterday, which was widely interpreted as an attack on Keir Starmer, which I don't think it actually was. But he said, look, we've got to do better at getting it right first time.
Yeah,
it's a statement of the bleeding obvious.
I mean, that's a statement of the bleeding obvious. Yeah. But we also have to be better at dealing with the uncertainty that not everything is going to work. So, look, I'm not a fan of digital ID. I've been very clear about that from the start. But do I think that digitisation could offer some benefits to public services? Yes, of course I do. I've just spent, half an hour trying to fiddle around with the child tax credit system, which is still complicated. There are things here about what are the purpose, what is the point of a Labour government, which are always questions that any government would have to answer. And now you've we've got a plan, and then Trump is going to invade Greenland.
Can I let Donald Trump interrupt you? Because he's just talking about Greenland now. Let's hear a little bit.
He gave us 50 million barrels of oil.
The number two, the Venezuela security chief.
I don't know. I know the number one. We just had a great conversation today. And she's a terrific person. I mean, she's somebody that we've worked with very well. Marco Rubio is dealing with her. I dealt with her this morning. We had a long call. We discussed a lot of things, and I think we're getting along very well with Venezuela.
Mr. President, a new Assistant Attorney General position dedicated to rooting out fraud.
Yeah, he's fantastic. The person is fantastic.
Who is it?
It's a he. I will tell you maybe within minutes. I mean, I don't know if it's appropriate to say yet because we're going through a process, but we have chosen a person who's very tough, very smart, very fair.
You gave a speech yesterday in Michigan about how you've recalibrated the American economy to work for workers, U.S. auto factories. We've seen core inflation's completely tamed. You lowered the trade deficit to the lowest amount since 2009.
I thought he was talking about Greenland, but clearly not. Have I asked all of you that question? No, I hadn't asked you. Hello, Brandon.
Oh, thank you very much. I have to say, although I would obviously have a lot of ideological and policy differences with this current government, I have been shocked, putting aside my policy disagreements, at how bad they've been at actually just managing being in government.
100%.
Having said all of that, I also remember, and I still probably got a few scars on my back, I do remember being very heavily involved in walking the streets and campaigning, and I was a minister for the 2017 general election, and the public's reaction to a government that called what was actually a very early general election. And when you've just had a general election, I'm not sure, with all of the buyer's remorse out there, I'm not sure that the country wants to keep going through this. We suffered as a party from calling an early general election, changing our leaders too often. That kind of instability that creates in the institution of the United Kingdom, I don't think is great. But all of that said, the flip side of that for me is getting rid of a Labour government as soon as possible is a good thing. But I can't see any way on earth that this government is going to choose, for all the reasons Annabelle rightly outlined, they're not going to call an early general election, certainly not in the next 18 to 24 months.
Dom?
Well, if they called an election, they'd call a U-turn about 2 days later anyway and change their minds.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been slamming this government in my social media because everyone thinks I'm a woke lefty, which I'm not. I'm not tribal. And I so wanted...
After 9 o'clock, maybe.
No, I'm just not. I so wanted this government to do well when they came in. I was so tired of the Tories. I was so tired of what they'd done. I felt there were decent people in this government, and I still feel that. I think they're a decent bunch. I think they want to do the right thing. But the U-turns are astonishingly bad. They've just become such a narrative for anyone that doesn't like the government. And when I was talking about, another U-turn, I was getting Labour supporters saying, well, what do you want? Do you want a government that when they realise they've made a mistake, they'll change their mind? I go, no, what you want is the blinding obvious. Don't make that mistake in the first place. And this is a government that came in, and I just think completely hadn't thought it through. I don't think they had a plan. I think they were so excited to get in. I mean, if there is a plan, I'd love to see it. I'd love them to be doing well. But these U-turns are such sort of grist to the reform mill to everyone that doesn't like them. It's not good.
Stella, are you frustrated that you're not a minister? Because a lot of us looking from the outside think, well, you've got a pretty stellar reputation.
That is a terrible dad joke.
I haven't actually prepared that. But
you just riffed it.
No, what I want to do is what I've always done, which is to try and engage in actually what does make things better. Because my constituents don't need an analysis; they need some answers. To
but if you're a minister, you can effect change.
You think none of us could do anything else apart from being in government? Look, I'm part of a political
but surely
movement.
Part of the reason you wanted to be an MP was to be in government.
Sometimes I'm wrong about things as well as right. One of the reasons why I'm worried about Parliament, right? One of the reasons why, frankly, today I voted against my own government on the use of the SI around public order is that I am really worried that in that space where things are so complicated, never more have we needed a debating chamber, scrutiny, actually the ability for people to contribute from a range of roles, and the spaces and places to do that are being minimised. So actually, I am really concerned, for example, about the use of statutory instruments to be able to make what are pretty major policy changes. I'm also really concerned about our democracy and disinformation and our ability to actually cope
I'm
with
hearing a
big
future speaker
problems.
here.
Hold on,
I don't. You're telling me I don't believe you have to have office to have power if you have the power of your ideas. I've always been somebody who's contributed.
I'm going to back Stella up on this one because
just stop ruining my career.
There's a couple of things I'm most proud of in my time in government. One was protecting our veterans. One of the other things I'm most proud of was giving women in Northern Ireland the ability to get access to healthcare support for abortion. But that started with Stella Creasy and what she did from the backbenches of the opposition to change the law that we then implemented in Northern Ireland. I think it's a good example. Backbenchers can absolutely influence and drive change and make big differences to government policy and create government policy actually and drive it. So
that's also I think that is
genuinely
cross-party support for certain.
There's cross-party, but there is also a challenge. Look, there is a challenge in the Labour movement, and I'm not going to underplay it, about that question of purpose, about the debate, about the disagreement. I am somebody who always says I am true Labour, not blue Labour. I have fundamental disagreements with colleagues on my benches about a various number of issues that I think reflect some of those things that the Labour movement just hasn't really thought about in the last 20 years. We spent a lot of time defending the NHS, not thinking about what the future of it is. We now need to have those debates because that could shape what government does next.
Right, couple of excellent questions coming up for you. One on Greenland. It's 8:46.
Right. This is LBC.
This was made
Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:48. After 9 o'clock, we have an hour of Ask the Correspondents, or Call the Correspondents, I should say, with Simon Martz and Aggie Chambray. Your chance to ask them anything you like about UK politics or what's happening in the US. Right, Brandon Lewis, Stella Creasy, Annabelle Denham and Dom Jolly here answering your questions. Michael is in Dover. Hello, Michael.
Good evening. Do the panel agree with Trump that America requires Greenland?
God. Well, Dom, I don't know why you laughed at agreeing with Trump, because you just did a few minutes ago.
I know, but I don't. Luckily, I'm not going to agree on this one.
Well, let's just give a little bit of context to this, because the foreign ministers of both Greenland and Denmark have been in Washington today, meeting with the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Denmark's foreign minister insists there are still fundamental disagreements between Copenhagen and Washington over Greenland. Dom, let's start with you then.
Well, I'm obviously confused by Trump, as I always am. He's a non-interventionist president who suddenly appears to have developed an incredible taste for surgical interventions. Now, Greenland, it's not that he's going to invade it. I mean, if he wanted to take Greenland, I've been to Greenland as well. That was
You've been everywhere.
I have. Well, I'm a travel writer, so that's what happens. But, and I can tell you, it was not anywhere I would want to invade, particularly. But they have a massive base there, and they've actually withdrawn troops.
They had 12 bases at one point.
Yeah.
Apparently.
So my point is they've withdrawn people from there. So it's not as though they're sort of desperate. We would need more people there. So an invasion really would not be an invasion. It would just be driving out of their base and trying to find someone. But no, I disagree with it absolutely completely. But I think he'll do it.
Yeah.
In what form?
Well, that I don't know. I mean, who knows how Trump's going to do it? But I mean, taking over Greenland is. I mean, literally, it's sort of driving into Gotthard and saying, you're American now, I think. I don't know. I can't see Denmark launching a defensive flotilla to... Can you? I mean, to rescue Greenland?
I can see. Look, one of the most fundamentally important areas of our national security is our membership of NATO.
Oh, 100%.
Which is why, anybody, every time I hear the Greens talking about we don't like NATO anymore, it's like, you do not understand the world in which we live in. These moments are what NATO was
totally
created
get that.
for.
But do you think Trump cares? I don't.
No, I think this is the worry for many of us. But I also think we should recognise, look, having just been kind of critical and reflexive about the government, I do actually think what is now happening with the alliances, with the build-up of troops in Greenland, with the work that is being done behind the scenes to stand with the Danish, is having an impact on this conversation. And we need to defend the concept of NATO, both for its allies and for its adversaries, because to do otherwise puts all of us at risk.
But the point
is, you want to talk about a government that's maybe finding it challenging right now, go back to Macmillan, events, dear boy, events. If NATO falls apart, the consequences for all of us and our way of life will be absolutely catastrophic.
But Trump just wants it as a trophy. I think it just feels good. I've taken Greenland.
And I think it's really important to recognise that Trump was not the first person to talk about.
No, it's been going on for ages.
Actually, our understanding of the world order has to be very, very different. I'm going to keep saying this because I'm quite concerned that this country doesn't realise quite what has been happening for some time. Actually, you can look under the Biden administration, you can look under Obama, the things that we took for granted that would keep us all safe and keep the world order have fragmented. A new world order needs to be created. At the heart of that is either aggression or alliances. Okay. I'm always going to choose alliances as a safer option.
Annabelle.
Do I support the annexation of European territory by America? No. I don't. Look, Trump is a very capricious individual, and it's a fool's errand to try and predict what he is or isn't going to do. But I would say at this stage, it strikes me as quite unlikely that he is going to try to invade Greenland. That's not to defend what I think are very feeble statements that we've seen, including today. A fundamental disagreement. I mean, come on, this is an extremely serious matter, even if Donald Trump doesn't intend to follow through with it. As to Stella's point on NATO, look, which country is overwhelmingly the biggest spender on defence in NATO? It's the US. Donald Trump has for years been urging other NATO members to increase their defence spending. Now, the Labour government promised a defence investment plan in which it would set out a date for reaching 3% of GDP on defence, and that was due in the autumn, and yet we still don't have a date for when we're going to find out when we will commit to that very important figure, let alone when we're going to get to 3.5% that NATO is now urging its members to reach. So, we've got to get very serious about the trade-offs that we're going to need to make in our economy in order that we can properly invest in defence. Otherwise, we will be dependent on a foreign power, America, for our security, and that will compromise our sovereignty.
Brandon.
Well, look, I think, as Emma said, Donald Trump has been very clear, even from his first term, about his views on the West generally and Europe not playing our part in funding NATO correctly and properly. And I think that's a fair critique. All of us in Europe saw the US's view on this very starkly when J.D. Vance went and spoke at the Munich Security Conference last year. He was not ad-libbing. That was a very clear message to everybody in the EU. And I think we've got to realise we are in a different world, and defence spending and what we do on defence is going to matter more now than it has done for a considerable period of time. Certainly in my modern lifetime. And you've only got to look around the world the changes in trade routes, the trade relationships, let alone what some of the hostile states are doing, to realize there is a shift in the world. The US for some considerable time has been looking more Pacific than it has across the Atlantic. Economically, understandably, when you look at what's happening in the Middle East and the East generally, and the way their economies are growing and moving very quickly, what you're seeing with China, with Russia, with the relationship with India as well, all of these things play into all of this. And you've only got to look at the security issues and trade routes around Greenland and why America would have a clear focus on that. It's why it's always had the base there. What I think is interesting in the statement today, and as Annabelle just quoted, this point around fundamental differences, and I accept Annabelle's point. What's interesting with that is that turn of phrase coming from somebody, if I understand correctly, who was in the room, which means there is a conversation between the US and Denmark around what the US may or may not really want to do with Greenland. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. One of the things I would say from government I've learned with the foreign affairs like this is see where it goes. It's very dangerous to predict what's going to happen, and that's going to be an interesting development. But but we've got to be clear that the whole structure as we've seen it internationally is changing. It just is dynamic.
Rico in Barnsley says, do you have any confidence that this country can build a large infrastructure project without it being partly cancelled and hugely over budget? Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has announced plans for the Northern Powerhouse Rail project running across Yorkshire and Lancashire, with construction on parts of the route now not set to begin until the 2030s. The project has been given a budget of £45 billion in total. Very quick answers on this, please. Stella.
Look, of course it's possible. But in the past, it hasn't worked. So you need to be better. The Major Projects Authority needs to have much more powers and much more grip of these things to be able to make them work.
Annabelle?
We are a country which is getting far too bogged down in process, and that is why we end up with thousands of pages of planning documents at enormous expense to the British taxpayer. I suspect that the £45 billion cap will be breached. Look at how much HS2 has cost us. Nevertheless, I almost want to see HS2, this massive white elephant project, be completed just as proof that the government can achieve something, that it can actually deliver on a large infrastructure project, even with the £100 million back tunnels and 52-page DEI reports and so on and so forth. So I live in hope.
Brandon?
We need to go a lot further in simplifying and streamlining our planning process to be able to have any chance of delivering major infrastructure projects in reasonable time, and not to do things on cost-plus basis when we're, I think, much more commercially, which means having people actually running these things who actually understand how the commercial construction world works, to have a chance of getting these things through. But the planning system at the moment, we started simplifying it. We need to go a lot further to get these things through and have the courage to see them through.
Dom?
I don't think there's any need for that right now. What I'd like is someone just to simplify our train system as it is, the ticketing system, mainly infrastructure. Why do I have to wait for 14 minutes at Gloucester Station for no reason at all on my way to London from Cheltenham? That's a personal one, but I don't think the government.
Many people mention that, actually. That is a big bugbear.
Well, I know why, because they have to. The driver has to get out and go to the other end and change the direction of the train. But why does it take that long? But that's quite a niche one, so I'll let the government off.
Right. Our fun question comes from Martha in Peacehaven. This country is going to get its first town of culture to go alongside its annual City of Culture. Pitch for where you're from to be our town of culture. Brandon Lewis, former Member of Parliament for Great Yarmouth.
Well, I would absolutely pitch for Great Yarmouth. Obviously, I'm not the Member of Parliament anymore, but it is a phenomenal place with a great mixture. It's got a phenomenal history, whether it's Nelson's time there, the fact we've still got one of only two, I think, in Great Yarmouth, the Victorian circuses, that is fantastic. And as you know, Ian, we've still got our fabulous
Go on, tell them.
promenade where you and I was going to say enjoyed, but visited and went to see Elvis impersonator night that was quite special and something to behold. It's got such a vibrancy around it and so much going on. It's a fantastic town.
And I etched on my mind, mainly because of the makeup of the audience.
I thought you were going to say the people who thought they looked like Elvis.
No,
really
it was mainly, shall we say, it was a bit like a Cliff Richard concert, women of a certain age.
And you and me.
Yeah.
And my wife.
And your wife. Stella.
Well, I don't need to compete because I represent Walthamstow, which is God's own country, and gave the world William Morris and also the musical genius of Brian Harvey and Fleur East. We have God's own junkyard. We've won lots of awards. We've got the William Morris Gallery.
That's
God's
your
own
best
junkyard.
pitch,
Have you ever been?
Oh, I used to live
There
in
you go.
Walthamstow.
You've missed out. God's own junkyard.
could have
Chris
been a
Bracey,
constituent of
award-winning, the home of Grace and Perry and the Walthamstow tapestry. We have high and lowbrow culture. We invented the iPad in Walthamstow as well because Johnny Ives was brought up and trained there, and also we created Durex because of the rubber factory. So we have entertained you in all sorts of ways. I'm absolutely confident of it.
Pardon.
And we are just getting going. So if you haven't come to the end of the Victoria line, you've missed
Annabelle.
out.
I'm just not sure how to follow. We invented Durex. Well, I'm from Harpenden, which is quite a small town. The population is only around 35,000, but nevertheless, it does have some distinguished former residents, including Stanley Kubrick, who lived just a mile south of the town, and Eric Morecambe. And there's now a venue in the town named after him. Not to mention what a delightful place it is to live generally, such that it was listed in the Telegraph's top 50 most desirable towns in which to live. And I assure you, Ian, and your listeners and the panel, that I had nothing to do with that.
Well, my hometown was number 1 in that list, Saffron Walden, which is even smaller than Harpenden. Dom Jolly.
Cheltenham, it's just a runaway winner, I'm afraid. I've toured all over the UK. I've been to almost every town, I think, in the UK. And Cheltenham just is streets ahead. It's beautiful. It's Regency. It really punches above its weight with restaurants, with culture, slightly lacking in live music and comedy events until my speakeasy set up. And it now has Gloucestershire's finest evening, first Thursday of every month, Dom Jolly Speakeasy. Only problem is the train facilities.
So what's the speakeasy?
It's basically a dingy basement where I have mystery guests.
It's not the Soho Theatre that we have in Walthamstow.
It is very good, yeah. But no, Cheltenham, genuinely.
No one else has got the Britannia Pier, so we win.
I've just realised we've got to let you go because you've got to get a train at 9:30.
Because otherwise I'm going to be stuck in Gloucester Station.
Thank you all very much indeed. While Dom leaves the studio, I will say that on tomorrow's panel we have the Liberal Democrat education spokesperson Munira Wilson, the former Conservative and now health policy commentator Steve Bryan, the author Emma Wolfe, and the political commentator Jonathan Liss. So that's tomorrow's Cross Question. In the next hour, it's your chance to phone in and ask questions to Aggie Chambray and Simon Marks in Call the Correspondents. Obviously, there's a lot going on tonight in the White House. We can we will talk about Iran, Greenland, anything else you like to Simon Marks. And on the domestic front, well, Aggie Chambray spends all of her days walking the streets of Westminster. I meant the corridors of power in Parliament, of course, where she taps up Stella Creasy for anonymous quotes to inform political reporting. So anything on the domestic front to Aggie Chambray coming up in just a moment here on LBC in Call the Correspondents.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner has refused to sack the head of West Midlands Police as calls for Craig Guildford to go increase. Simon Foster says he's waiting for a parliamentary review into the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from a football match. West Midlands Police have apologised for mistakes. A report accused the force of overstating threats. Russell Langer from the Jewish Leadership Council has been speaking to LBC.
The one question remaining is why? Why do they feel that this is the decision they had to come to? It's also fundamental that we don't allow that to become the end of the story. We will be continuing discussions with government and locally to make sure that these serious issues, be them in Birmingham or elsewhere with policing in this country, are taken seriously.
The US president says he's been told that killings in Iran's crackdown on nationwide protests are stopping. Donald Trump says he believes there's currently no plan for large-scale executions.
They told me that there'll be no executions, and so I hope that's true.
Does this mean military action is now off the table against Iran?
No, we're going to watch it and see what the process is, but we were given a very good statement by people that are aware of what's going on.
Iran has threatened to target American sites in neighbouring countries if the US leader intervenes in anti-regime protests. Here, the government says the British embassy in Tehran has been temporarily closed and will now operate remotely. The Danish foreign minister says he hasn't managed to change America's mind on Greenland after meetings in the White House. Donald Trump threatened to take control of the island, an autonomous territory of Denmark. A new rail line will be built between Birmingham and Manchester. Ministers say it won't be a reinstatement of HS2 after the previous Conservative government scrapped that high-speed route in 2023. Phase 1, to open in the late 2030s, will see improved connections between Sheffield, Leeds, York and Bradford. And Sting has paid more than £500,000 to his former bandmates in the Police since facing legal action over unpaid royalties. The case hinges on the interpretation of agreements made between when the band were formed in the late 1970s and 2016. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 47 points at 10,184. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather. Showers moving eastwards tonight, becoming patchier in the south, becoming clearer for western areas later, a low of -2. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:05 on LBC. Now, just before Christmas, we did our first Call the Correspondents phone-in with Simon Marks and Aggie Chambray, and it proved to be a bit of a hit. So we thought we'd invite them both back tonight for a second run at it. So the number to call if you have a question for Simon Marks, our US correspondent, and Aggie Chambray, our new Deputy Political Editor, grand title, you can call 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us your questions on the same number, text 84850. Simon, welcome. Always good to see you. Do you want to just give us a little?
With you, Iain.
Do you want to just give us a little bit of a roundup of what's gone on tonight at the White House? Donald Trump has been speaking, and I think there've been a few significant developments, haven't there?
Yeah, very much so. It's been a busy old afternoon here in Washington. The president has just wrapped up an event at the White House that was related to some changes that he's making in the rules about school milk, actually, here in the United States. But he did make news on two major areas of foreign policy. First of all, Iran, amid growing expectations that the clock was ticking and we were heading to a situation where the United States might imminently launch a military strike against Iran. The president surprised reporters with a bit of news that he said had come from very important sources on the other side, relating to what he says he hopes is actually taking place now inside Iran. Let's listen to what he said.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that a good authority. We'll find out about it. I'm sure if it happens, we'll all be very upset, including you will be very upset. But that's just gotten to me, some information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution. which a lot of people were talking about for the last couple of days. Today was going to be the day of execution.
So remember, of course, there was a threat to execute a 26-year-old shopkeeper, Irfan Soltani, who had been arrested only on the 8th of January and very, very rapidly sentenced to death. The president seemed to be implying there that execution in Iran is not taking place, and there are certainly other reports suggesting it has been delayed. But equally, while he was saying the killing has stopped, human rights groups were reporting that the killing is very much still underway of protesters in Iran. So where this leaves military action is unclear. He was asked twice by reporters if this means military action by the United States is off the table, and he evaded the question and simply said that after the meeting that he was in at the White House ended, he was going to go off and gather more information about what he says the United States has heard from the other side, by which I presume he means Iranian officials. So let's see where that goes. The US had been evacuating, like the UK, military personnel from the Al Udeid air base in Qatar, and there were other indications that the clock might be ticking on a plan to launch a military strike on Iran, but perhaps that is not now going to take place, at least over the course of the next few hours. The other big topic here today is Greenland. There's been an extraordinary meeting at the White House between the Danish foreign minister, the Greenlandic foreign minister, Vice President J.D. Vance and the Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The two foreign ministers from Denmark and Greenland, respectively, said that it was a frank conversation. They said that elements of it were constructive, but their perspectives differed from those.
We're going to see what happens with Greenland. We need Greenland for national security, so we're going to see what happens. They're going to brief me on the meeting right after this conference. In fact, the sooner I get you out, the faster I'm going to know exactly what happened. But we have a very good relationship with Denmark, as you know. We'll see. But, we're doing the Golden Dome. We're doing a lot of things, and we really need it. If we don't go in, Russia's going to go in, and China's going to go in. And there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it, but we can do everything about it.
Marking what they can do there?
Well, we're going to see. I mean, look, we're going to see what happens, but we need it. I'm not the first one. This was talked about by President Truman, and 40 years before President Truman, they were talking about it. They've been talking about this for 100 years. This is not anything so new. A lot of people don't realize that, but this was a hot subject. Probably not as hot as it is now, but it was a hot subject for a long time. We need it for national security, and that includes for Europe. And I spoke with, as you know, Mark, the head of NATO, and he really wants to see something happen.
So, fresh threats there to Greenland from the President of the United States, coming just hours after the Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers met J.D. Vance, the Vice President, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the White House. It does not appear to have been a meeting of minds. The Danish foreign minister said that they had all agreed to disagree, to set up a high-level working group to see if they could find any kind of compromise. But the two foreign ministers from Denmark and Greenland accused President Trump of embracing untrue narratives about what is taking place in Greenland and pushed back relentlessly against those claims that the waters of Greenland are teeming with Russian and Chinese vessels. They say it's simply not true.
Aggie, there's been a development tonight. The British Embassy in Tehran has been temporarily closed. Presumably that's also in the wake of American forces being evacuated from their Qatari bases. What should we read into this?
And UK being evacuated too. That's right. I mean, I think it looked like for a while that this might mean that some sort of strike from the US was imminent. Reading into Donald Trump's words as well a little earlier today, that seemed to be the case. We got a statement from a government spokesperson saying we have temporarily closed the British Embassy in Tehran. This will now operate remotely. Foreign Office travel advice has now been updated to reflect this consular change. But listening to Simon, listening to Donald Trump speaking in the last hour, it sounds like potentially he may have walked that back slightly because he's made that statement that killing has stopped. Basically, he is saying as a result of what he was saying and the threats that the US has been giving.
Well, if you'd like to ask any questions about these subjects or indeed anything else, including maybe the fact that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, says she's lost confidence in the Chief Constable of the West Midlands, that's something that you might want to phone in about. And the state of the government. I mean, all these U-turns, Aggie, people always say, well, all governments do U-turns, and they do. I mean, even Margaret Thatcher's government did the odd U-turn. Although I noticed Andrew Marr earlier said that the poll tax was a Thatcher U-turn. It wasn't. That was John Major. Just had to get that one in. It is unprecedented, isn't it?
It is unprecedented to have this many U-turns in such a short space of time. So we're, 18 months in? We've had, by everyone's count, 13 U-turns so far. And it's not like these have been small U-turns. These have been, defining policies that they have gone back on. Like, for example, think of the row they had over winter fuel payments, then U-turned on. Think of the row they had over welfare, then U-turned on. Welfare, to be fair, they literally could not have got that through Parliament in the state that they were trying to get it through Parliament in. And there is an argument being made by some people that, look, they're just trying to get the barnacles off the boat because they want to focus on cost of living. So basically doing away with all those unpopular policies. But I think that's left some people wondering, well, then what's left and what does this Prime Minister and indeed government stand for? Which is a question people have asked a lot, but I think are asking in an increasing regularity.
Right, before we go to a break, let's take this question from Sam. I have a question for the amazing Simon Marks. No mention of you, Aggie, here, it has to be said. I've heard that the White House, where Greenland is concerned, that they have said that they're worried about China and Russia invading and the boat that they stopped. Does this mean that Trump isn't that friendly with Putin anymore? Simon.
Well, I think it's not so much that they think that they're concerned about China and Russia invading. They are concerned that in the Arctic there is a battle for resources and that Greenland becomes, they argue, increasingly important to American national security. And President Trump keeps repeating this false refrain that Chinese and Russian vessels are constantly surveying the waters off Greenland. The Danish foreign minister said today it has been 10 years since a Chinese vessel was recorded in the waters off Greenland. So Denmark and Greenland say it's a completely false narrative. Sheila, the other day on her programme, interviewed a former correspondent with Greenlandic Broadcasting who said that, people of Greenland cannot remember when they last saw Russian or Chinese vessels in their waters. And that's why this is such a confounding story for the Danes, for Denmark's NATO allies, for our own government, because once again, and we've seen this on so many occasions, Donald Trump is making foreign policy decisions on the basis of an entirely false narrative, and it seems to be impossible to get him off it.
Well, who's feeding him this false narrative, or is he just making it up as he goes along?
Look, there are influential voices in his ear about Greenland, Iain, and they include some of the captains of the tech industry who like the look of Greenland. First of all, because there's plenty of rare earth minerals there that the tech industry wants to get its hands on, but also because some of them see Greenland as this vast, undeveloped expanse of land, perfect for what they're looking for as they think about building these vast server farms, server farms the size of Manhattan that they need to build the artificial intelligence industry. So there are influential voices definitely in Donald Trump's ears saying to him, this is a national security priority. You ought to go in and nab it.
Simon, thank you. 0345 6060 973. It's your calls and messages to Simon and Aggie right up to 10 o'clock. Quick question for Aggie from Nikki. Boris Johnson U-turned 40 times on major policies during his disastrous tenure at number 10. Will Keir surpass him? I don't know where that 40 times comes from. I'd like to see that list.
Well, there were quite a lot from Boris Johnson. I mean, even including things like COVID, where he, suggested the best thing to do would be ignore COVID. And then, of course, there was a national lockdown. I'm not sure he can be entirely blamed for that because obviously lots of people didn't know exactly what COVID was going to be like until it really happened. But within COVID as well, there were huge numbers of U-turns. Whether or not Keir Starmer will do more than 40, if indeed that is the number, I don't have that number myself to hand. If we're saying he's done 13 at the moment in 18
months. It's 13 in 18 months, so in a 5-year parliament.
If he gets
to 5, you see, I don't think he will. I think it'll go 4 years. June 2028, that's my bet for a general election, or October 2028.
Well, I think it depends entirely who's leading the Labour Party.
Controversial. You may want to ask Aggie to develop that line of thought a little bit further.
I would probably say if indeed Boris Johnson did do 40 U-turns during his tenure, I don't think Keir Starmer will surpass that.
I do. Because we like to disagree, don't we? 18 minutes past 9.
This is LBC. Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
It's Call the Correspondents with Simon Marks and Aggie Chambray. Let's go to your calls, 0345 6060 973. Grace is in Ealing. Hello, Grace.
Hi. Trump said last week that he'll be constrained only by his own morality. And I wondered what anyone thinks that is.
Aren't we all constrained by our own morality? I mean, the very picture of morality, I'm looking at him right now, it's Simon Marks.
I think it's a good point that we're often only adhering to our own morality. But yes, Trump in particular, I wonder how Trump defines morality, and I wonder what Simon Marks thinks Trump's morality is.
Go on, Simon.
Grace, I think it's a wonderful question. I mean, look, this came in the context of the interview that Donald Trump was giving last week to the New York Times when he said, I don't need international law. He was being questioned at the time, of course, about his decision to launch that attack on Venezuela so he could make off with President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. He said, I don't need international law. When he was asked what he would be constrained by, he said by his own morality, which I mean, I think we can all probably agree is deeply concerning, because this is a president of the United States who has not demonstrated any particularly admirable morality. He's a president of the United States who lies constantly to the point where I think even the major news organizations that used to deploy fact checkers have largely given up even trying to keep up with the welter of falsehoods. We know that his own morality was very questionable on January the 6th, 2021, when he made that inflammatory speech to his supporters shortly before they engaged in their deadly rampage on Capitol Hill in an effort to try and undo a democratic American election. And we know that there must be questions at least about his own morality, in as much as it related to his friendship with the disgraced just deceased financier Jeffrey Epstein, because the White House is going to stunning lengths to make sure that those 2 million pages of documents about Jeffrey Epstein do not make their way into the public domain, despite the fact that the law requires them to release them. So what his morality is, I mean, I'm not a moral monitor. I can't necessarily identify, but I think it is certainly concerning to think that the only thing that's holding him back is not international law, but his own personal morality.
Aggie, when British politicians talk about morality, people slightly cringe, don't they? I mean, why shouldn't we talk about morality? Morality is surely a good thing to discuss.
Yes, I think you're right. I don't think we hear a huge amount of British politicians talking about morality or making arguments based on their own morality and sort of explaining that's where it's come from. I think it probably is because people do slightly cringe, and it's just not really the way it's done with that sort of level of earnestness, I suppose, here. But I suppose, isn't it nice to think that maybe it's coming from their own moralities when politicians are making these arguments? They just don't talk about it?
See, there are some politicians where, I mean, Frank Field was a good one, where you thought, well, that he is a deeply moral man. But there aren't many politicians that you would put that word with nowadays, are there?
I don't know about that. I think if you think about some politicians who, I don't know, the person who came to mind was Kim Leadbeater, who's come into politics quite late in life. And whether you agree or disagree with assisted dying, you feel when she talks about it that she has had that argument shaped by her own morality. And actually, just thinking about assisted dying, people on the other side of assisted dying, watching those debates and those speeches, people making on both sides of the argument, you did feel that was really coming from their own morality and their own sense of ethics, really.
I was tempted to ask if you need to be religious to be moral, but I'll answer my own question, because I think that even if you aren't religious, you can still have a deep sense of personal morality.
Definitely.
I don't need a vicar or priest or whoever to tell me right from wrong. I know it. That doesn't mean to say I'm always going to act and do the right thing, but you inwardly know what's right and wrong, don't you?
I think that's right. I think everyone, well, you would hope, especially in politics. And I would say more politicians are in it for the right reasons than the wrong reasons. There are plenty of politicians who are in it for the wrong reasons.
Oh, who?
Not worth the job to say that.
Burn those contacts. Right, let's take another question. Mark says, we've kind of already answered this in a way. Given the apparent unpopularity of our government, what are the prospects or possibilities or strategies for an early general election? Well, we talked about this on Cross Question as well, and the panel were united that there is no prospect of an early general election.
I completely agree with that. I think there is a book written, Diaries of Gordon Brown's Time in Office, and they were having a meeting and someone junior was basically suggesting that maybe they should have a general election earlier. This wasn't actually when he nearly went to have a general election, but maybe a year earlier than the general election needed to be. And someone more senior responded, of course he's gonna wait as long as he can, because this is where decisions are made. And you hear similar things from people like Keir Starmer when he says he wouldn't swap 5 years in opposition for a day in government. And I think sort of the fact that they are so unpopular probably means they'll hang on as long as they possibly can and try and up their popularity.
Right, let's take a call from David in Kingsbury. David, very good evening. What would you like to ask?
What I'd like to ask is, we don't have a written constitution, and I heard an MP, a minister, lie blatantly on Andrew Marr's programme. What mechanism do we have if politicians in power tell stories that can be easily disproved, as I disproved it within 5 minutes?
What are you referring to?
Ed Miliband saying that the wind power from his new wind farms was going to be cheaper than gas, and it's actually £55 per unit for gas and £95 per unit for the wind farm. Plus it uses gas and it only works about 30% of the time, and you have to pay for the interconnectors as well. So if you put it all together, it costs a lot more than gas. whichever way you
And
look
you see,
at
that's the sort of thing where if I'm interviewing somebody, I mean, I wouldn't have that level of knowledge that you've got on those sorts of things, and therefore I couldn't hold and I'm sure Andrew Marr would say the same thing, that,
that's all right,
that you can't necessarily always tell if a politician. I mean, I don't think many. Aggie, you tell me what you think, but I don't think many politicians deliberately tell an overt lie. But there are different grades of truth, I suppose.
I think that's right. I thought what Ed Miliband was trying to say, that it was, because I think he was challenged on that point. And I think Andrew Marr did have the numbers to hand. I think it was 55 and then 91, 90 or something like that. And I think the point that Ed Miliband made was that it was comparing apples and oranges. But I think on the lying point, I mean, there are mechanisms if you lie, for example, in the House of Commons chamber and are found to have lied. That was famously a massive, massive problem for Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister. But in terms of kind of lying in interviews, I would agree with Iain that I don't think politicians do lie very much, at least not on purpose. But there are, they can choose to withhold information. I think it works broadly the same kind of off the record, where if I'm asking a special advisor, for example, a question, or an MP a question, I would be very, very shocked, actually, genuinely shocked, if they lied to me, outright lied. And
has it ever happened?
I don't think so. Not that I can remember. But I think there's a difference. But often they don't give me the information I want, or often they'll, palm me off and say, go and speak to this person. But outright lying, I mean, what about you? Do you feel it happens a lot?
No, I don't. But Simon, what do you think? And do you think it's different in America? Because the American sort of political system and media system is a bit different to ours.
Well, we're so post-truth here now in the United States that I can't even remember what it used to be like before. But to pick up on David's point about, the difference between having a written constitution versus not having a written constitution. I mean, America's got a written constitution, but at this point, it's not entirely clear that it's worth the paper that it is written on, because all of the constitutional guardrails, as we have come to understand them here in the United States, have basically, been laid waste by President Donald Trump just this week, going after again the independence of the Federal Reserve. We've already seen him eviscerate the independence of the Department of Justice, which turns out not to be constitutionally guaranteed. It's traditionally an independent department. Well, not anymore. And so, I mean, a constitution, whether it's written or not, is only worth the weight that politicians are willing to place on observing the rules of the road. And what we're witnessing here is a government that has no interest in the rules of the road whatsoever, completely overriding Congress, often disregarding the courts, and an increasingly autocratic administration that the Constitution on paper suggests can't happen here, and yet every single day it's taking place.
Bass says, to be a politician, you have to lie. Please don't be so naive. I don't agree with that. I think sometimes when you're a government minister, particularly if you're in a security department, you probably can't tell the whole truth. But there is a difference between lying and not telling the whole truth. I remember when I was trying to be the candidate in North Norfolk, the first question I got in the selection was, Iain Dale, we see that you're good friends with Anne Widdecombe, who's against hunting. Do you agree with her views on hunting? And I actually did agree with her views on hunting, because she was against. But I knew that if I actually told the whole truth, that would scupper me. Mm-hmm. So what I said was, just because Anne Widdecombe's my friend doesn't mean to say that I agree with her on everything. And I just let it lie there, which you could say was
strongly implying
that I did agree with her, or not agree with her. Yeah. But anyway, I did get selected. So, mind you, I wish I hadn't, seeing as I lost. But there we are. More questions in a moment. 0345 6060 973. That's the number to call if you'd like to talk to Simon Marks and Aggie Chambray in Call the Correspondents. It's 9:31 on LBC News Headlines with Darryl Jackson.
The head of West Midlands Police is facing growing pressure to go over a decision to ban Israeli football fans from a match at Aston Villa. Craig Guildford has denied it was politically motivated after a report found the risk of violence posed by Maccabi Tel Aviv fans was overstated. The US president says he's been told that killings in Iran's crackdown on nationwide protests are stopping. Donald Trump says he believes there's currently no plan for large-scale executions. And Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers say they've had a frank and constructive discussion with the US Vice President and Secretary of State. But they say the two sides continue to have different perspectives on the Danish territory's long-term future. LBC weather: showers moving eastwards tonight, becoming patchier in the south, becoming clearer for western areas later, a low of -2.
This is LBC. Dale on LBC.
9:33 on LBC. We have Simon Marks and Aggie Chambray with us taking your questions on 0345 6060 973. Now, Aggie has learned a valuable lesson in the half hour that she's been sitting with me, because she can see all of the texts and WhatsApp messages that are coming in. And I think you're slightly horrified by some of them, aren't you? Because they're having a right old go at you. This one from Sarah: waiting for the so-called journalist Aggie to find where Boris did 40 U-turns, probably because he didn't. And we've had several texts saying similar sorts of things. Well, you've done a bit of research on this. I've done a bit of research. Well, I've put it into ChatGPT, and ChatGPT also mentions the 40 figure.
Yes, it looks like it was about 40. I mean, so the context was, if you haven't been listening for the whole hour, is someone wrote in, apologies, I don't remember the name of the person who wrote in, but wrote in and asked whether Keir Starmer would do more than 40 U-turns in the time that he was in office. At the moment, he's done, we are counting 13. I said probably not, and I said if that 40 figure is right. And we've had a few messages.
A few.
But now
you have to develop a very
rescue.
thick skin doing this job, Aggie, let me tell you. I'm not sure my skin is as thick as it should be. Right, let's take another WhatsApp message here. This is from Paul. So Trump encouraged Iranian people to go out and protest, saying he'd got their back, and threatened Iran not to kill protesters. Then, after 3,000 to 10,000 protesters have been killed, he says it will not continue. Isn't it a bit late and weak? I feel for the poor Iranian people who rose up listening to his encouraging words. And Simon, I feel a sense of history repeating itself here, because didn't America lead the Iranian people up the garden path, what was it, 2008, 2009, and hinted that America would come to the Iranian people's aid for the protests that were happening then, and then didn't. And there was a tremendous feeling that they'd been let down by, I can't remember whether it was George Bush or Barack Obama.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to prejudge where we are here this afternoon, Ian, because We've seen President Donald Trump previously sort of implying that he wasn't going to take military action against Iran and he was going to give talks more time. And then suddenly he did strike at Iran's nuclear facilities along with the Israelis last June. So, and he did not answer the question, and he was asked twice by reporters, does this mean, you say the killing is stopping, you say the executions are not taking place, does this mean you're not going to launch military action? And he evaded the question. So I don't think it's an absolute given that there isn't going to be some kind of US military assault on Iran. But equally, there are voices here that say the United States has got to be very careful because already the regime in Iran is branding protesters foreign agents. They're saying that the Americans and the Israelis have fomented these protests. And if the United States strikes, it needs to be very careful because if it's not careful, it could embolden the regime to be even more brutal in its crackdown on protesters. Now, that's one of the reasons why many foreign policy observers here have criticised what Donald Trump's been doing since the beginning of the year, going on social media on the 2nd of January and saying that US forces were locked and loaded, and if protesters were killed, he wouldn't hesitate to take military action. Then protesters were killed. He took no military action. Over the weekend, we were hearing much vaguer suggestions from President Trump about his determination to get embroiled. Earlier this week, help is on the way. Well, what does that mean when you say help is on the way? The best thing he could do, most observers in this town argue, is to stop tweeting about it and sit down with his strategists and calmly and cautiously decide what the best approach is. But calm, cautious approaches are not always the way that Donald Trump, in fact, they're never the way that Donald Trump likes to approach these things. And so I think we're still in a situation where in the hours and days ahead, absolutely anything could happen.
Thank you, Simon. David in Bayswater is on the line. Hi, David.
Hello. Yeah. So just a quick question. Do the panel think that the present government are having problems with U-turns because of a more left-leaning group of MPs than they are, and also because there's an electorate that's unwilling to accept change rather than intrinsically bad decisions on the part of the government?
Very interesting question, Aggie.
Really interesting question. And I think it is a real mix, to be honest. So I think that some MPs are obviously more left-wing than this government. Some people have branded this government kind of actually more right-wing than they'd expected, especially for somebody leading it to have been a former human rights lawyer. So I think that is part of it. But I think there is also some parts of it, of the public not being willing to accept change. And I think some of that, so if we take, on that point, if we take winter fuel, for example, I think it has increasingly become difficult for benefits to, any kind of benefits to be given to the public and then a government trying to take them away. I think that is really, really, really difficult. And I think that is what this government has found. And I think it's interesting because MPs sort of fighting for a policy to be changed often actually comes from their constituents. So MPs will, as I'm sure you know, go back to their constituencies probably Thursday night and come back on Monday morning. And in that time, they will do events, they will go to fetes, they will go to local schools, and fundamentally, they will just spend their time talking to their constituents, as well as getting many, many, many emails, many, many, many phone calls and meetings.
Which is why they're actually a lot more in touch with their electorate than people think.
Definitely.
Because very few MPs have weekends because they're in Parliament during the week, as you say, in their constituencies at the weekends, and they're talking to people in all sorts of environments, as you say. So they ought to be, not all of them, but most of them ought to be really in touch with what people are thinking.
Yeah, so often actually it can take a little while. So I'm going to come back to winter fuel actually. So on that point, that was announced by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, in July, straight after they'd been elected. And all of the MPs then went back to their constituencies for the summer. I'm not going to call them summer holidays, but obviously they did have summer holidays as well. And they spent that time talking to their constituents. And because there was a lot of anger on the doorstep, I think then lots of Labour MPs came back to Parliament in September and thought, actually, this just won't work. And I think it was only when actually there was a by-election that Labour lost, when people were then bringing that policy up again, that there was finally a U-turn on that. But with, for example, two-child benefit cap, that's actually not a policy. That was something, of course, brought in by George Osborne when he was Chancellor. That's actually not, that policy when George Osborne brought it in, and indeed up to the point that it was U-turned on, has actually been pretty popular with the public. The public don't hate that policy at all. Labour MPs, though, do hate that policy. So I think that is an example of the majority of Labour MPs, not necessarily being more left-wing, but just as Labour MPs, they felt fundamentally uncomfortable with there being a two-child benefit cap. And that, of course, is now gone.
Right, Simon has a question for Simon. Please could I ask Simon if he's ever had any trouble at the border with the new rules about having to provide access to your social media, etc. Assuming he gets sent lots of commentary and tips and has lots of conversations that might contain Trump or US government, do you get questioned, or is there some sort of protection for reporters?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Simon. I mean, I've had no issue at the borders, and I am not required to provide my social media history, and I've never been asked to show anything, but I'm not coming into the United States on either an ESTA or a visa. I'm a legal permanent resident of the United States. So I have a green card. I'm not an American citizen. I'm a British passport holder, but a legal permanent resident of the United States. And up until now, I am happy to report that I have simply been waved through every time I have returned to the United States, as I did just a few days ago, following my Christmas and New Year period in the UK. Now, those of us who are green card holders and those people who are dual citizens, US and UK citizens, I mean, we are certainly aware of the possibility of additional scrutiny being applied to us, theoretical at the moment, but certainly the denaturalization of some dual citizens is being discussed by the Trump administration. But I can tell you that in my situation with that green card, I just am waved through. I do think that for those foreign journalists who are here on what are known as I visas, which is a visa specifically for foreign journalists based in the United States, and I first came in here on an I visa many years ago, I do think that the sands are shifting and there are rules changes coming to the governance of I visas that I think is going to make it increasingly difficult for reporters travelling here from overseas. So I think there are concerns about other reporters that are based here and the scrutiny that they may come under. But in my case, it hasn't been an issue.
So if I decided, or if LBC decided that I should come and present a month of programmes from your studios in Washington,
I'll come with you.
You'd come with me, yeah, I bet you would. Aggie and I would have to get I visas, and they would then trawl through our social media. They might listen to programmes that I've done where I've been very critical of Donald Trump, and that probably means I wouldn't be granted one.
Well, they might. I mean, I think it's not axiomatic that you wouldn't be granted one or that they would trawl through your social media, but certainly they are reserving the right.
Wouldn't wish that on anyone.
So. And that is. And that we've all read it, and that is what is I think so concerning to people that this is an administration that not only, if you want to come here as a tourist for an ESTA, wants to see your social media history. Their proposals also suggest that they want to collect your DNA. I mean, these are extraordinary measures for any government to be taking, especially for the government of what is supposed to be our close special relationship ally.
Well, it could be interesting with the World Cup coming up in June, where even sports journalists might have to go through this. Quick question before we go to break to you, Simon, from Joe. Could you ask Simon whether Donald Trump has the legal authority to prevent the midterm elections in November? Also, if he were to lose both houses, what would happen next?
OK, so if he loses both houses, impeachment investigations will begin in the House of Representatives next January, which is why I am increasingly convinced that Donald Trump will make sure that under no circumstances does he lose control of the House of Representatives, because that's where impeachment investigations begin. So you're seeing all of this redistricting going on, the redrawing of constituency boundaries, and I suspect there will be lots more jiggery-pokery in the months ahead. As for whether he has the authority to cancel the midterm elections, well, that's untested. It's another one of those constitutional questions. I mean, on the face of it, you'd say no, but no one's ever tried it before. And were he to look at his political situation and be sufficiently grim about it that he decided he was going to lose those midterms, he could, and I think he might, invoke the 1807 Insurrection Act, flood active duty troops onto the streets of Democrat-run towns and cities all over the country, say that there is a public state of national emergency, and much as he would love the elections to take place, the country is too febrile, it's too brittle for them to occur. I think we are in for very, very uncertain months ahead as that midterm election campaign takes shape. And I think he's absolutely determined to make sure that he's not facing the prospect of another round of impeachment inquiries next January.
Simon, thank you. We'll come back to you in a moment. This hour has flown by. Only 13 more minutes with Simon and Aggie. You can still phone in 0345 6060 973. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Henry Riley.
Donald Trump refuses to rule out military action in Iran as their foreign minister says they're now in control. What should happen next? Plus, that bungling police chief in the West Midlands somehow is still in his role.
Henry Riley at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
A Thames
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
10 to 10, Simon Marks and Aggie Sean Bray with me answering your questions. James says, a question for Simon. James is obviously watching on Global Player, the LBC app or the YouTube channel, because he says, is that background real? And does Simon always sit with the White House in the background? Or is it a green screen and he's safe in a Washington room in case ICE come a-calling after they read his social media?
James, the background is real, and it's the picture that you're seeing is being displayed. For those people who are listening on the radio, I've got a live picture of the White House behind me, and that picture is being taken by a camera that we have placed on the roof of the building from where I am broadcasting. So I tell you what, James, if you ever come to Washington, D.C., let me know, and I will take you up to the roof, and I will let you see the view for yourself. We are unbelievably lucky to be located in a building that is literally a block and a half away from Donald Trump's front door. And when you take visitors up to that building, I took Rachel Johnson up there just a couple of weeks ago when she was here in Washington, D.C. It is the most stunning view in Washington, D.C. I can go up there and have my lunch up there on a terrace looking down on that very view that you see right over my shoulder. But at the moment, I'm not on the roof. I'm in our internal studio downstairs, and it's projected onto a plasma screen behind me.
The tricks of the trade, eh? Right, let's go to Sean, who is in Preston. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Ian. My question is it conceivable that Trump could take Greenland by force?
Well, if he tried to take it by force, it's not only conceivable, it's 100% certain, because there's no way that the Greenlanders will be able to resist. But Simon, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I think Sean's asking a very important question. And yes, it is conceivable, and we absolutely should not rule it out. I mean, I think that if there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, he tells you what he's going to do. And he's making it absolutely clear that he's going to get his hands on Greenland one way or the other. They did not at the White House 10 days ago need to say that military options were on the table. The fact that they said it means that military options are on the table. And this idea that under no circumstances will he use force to seize Greenland, I just don't buy it. I think that, when he says he's going to do something, or he might do something, we should all take him at face value, because invariably he goes ahead and does it.
Thank you for that. Ian says, can I thank your lady assistant, that's you, Aggie, apparently, I'm going to call you that now forever, for her I don't know what that makes you, Simon.
This is entertaining me far too much.
It's entertained me very much.
It's like Nick Abbott with your glamorous assistant.
That's right. For her very clear explanations. For an apparent newcomer, she's doing just fine.
We've been doing this job.
So we have some lovely people listening, don't
really
we?
Nice.
Right, let's take a random WhatsApp message. This is from Lucy. I'd love to know... sorry, I'm reading this in a different screen. Let me get it right. Here we are. I'd love to know the fabulous Simon's view on whether he thinks Trump is Putin's agent or not.
Well, look, I mean, I think that it's absolutely evident that there is more to the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin than any of us understands. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he is, in an active sense, Putin's agent. You could argue that Donald Trump wants to be like Vladimir Putin, and he wants to be like President Xi Jinping. And that's why he's suddenly, over the course of the last month particularly, begun to behave in this totally unplugged, unrestrained way, not believing in international law, not being constrained by it. He wants to be a big man on the world stage. But there's no question that Donald Trump is oddly beguiled by Vladimir Putin. And I think, we can all speculate as to why that may be. Have the Russians got what they call in Russia compromat on him? Have they got compromising materials? I mean, who knows? But it's definitely a very odd relationship.
Right, Matt in Essex. I think this counts as the equivalent of the cross-question fun question here. If Aggie and Simon could have a chinwag with any politician, past or present, dead or alive, who would it be, and what's the big question you'd want them to answer? Simon, you go first.
Well, I thought, yes. I mean, I'd probably, given the current circumstances in which we find ourselves, want to sit down and have a chat with Winston Churchill, I think, and say, how do you think we're going to get out of all of this? Because the absence of any kind of Churchillian leadership in London or anywhere else at this point on the world stage, certainly in Europe, I think is very notable. I can't imagine Winston Churchill rolling over time and again when Donald Trump launches attacks on the BBC, when Donald Trump makes claims about free speech in the UK. I can't imagine that by now we wouldn't have stood up to the United States, but I'd be interested to know if Winston Churchill took that view or whether he would also agree that, the primacy of the trade relationship is so important we mustn't do anything to irritate the American president. So I'd probably go down that road at this particular moment.
Maggie?
I would not say no to a chat with Winston Churchill, but maybe Margaret Thatcher. I'd love to know what she made of how the Tories were getting on now. Would she join Reform? What does she think of Brexit?
No, she'd say.
No.
But what honestly, what would she think of how the Tories are getting on?
Well, she'd be rather horrified.
What's her advice to?
Well, I can't channel the spirit of Margaret Thatcher.
I'm sure you can, Ian.
I'm sure at some point in the future, AI is going to develop so we could actually have these conversations with dead people and they will actually come back with an avatar or something.
And also JFK, just, tell us what happened in the last few moments of your life.
Well, I think we know what happened in these last few moments.
But from his standpoint.
Can I use presenter's prerogative here and say who I would talk to?
Yes, of course.
Richard Nixon. Who I think is one of the most fascinating characters. Anybody who's listening, if you ever get the chance to go to the Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, just outside Los Angeles, it is one of the most fantastic places. And you can listen to the tapes that were recorded in the Oval Office. I went in 1994, so a very long time ago. I went for 2 hours and then went back and spent the whole of the next day there, sort of totally unplanned. And if you've read any of Richard Nixon's books, you will know what a brilliant mind he had. And I think I would just ask him, why? Why did you not sort of disown the burglars? And if you had done that, you would have been seen as one of the most successful presidents in American history. And on such things do careers break. So there we are. I think I answered that in a longer way than you both did.
You answered it beautifully.
Well, thank you very much. Right, final one here before we have to finish and hand over. I'm just scrolling up as we've had so many. No, we've already done that. No, we're going to have to finish because we've reached the end of the hour. Simon, thank you very much indeed. We will do this again very soon. Aggie, thank you. Don't forget, Cross Question again at 8 o'clock tomorrow, and I'll be back tomorrow from 7. Thanks for all of your calls and questions this evening. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. Put your news categories in the order you want, pause and rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. And download the all-new official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, in for Ben Kentish, it's Henry Riley.
Thank you very